open to anyone, all around the world. The Chess.com Global Championship offers the dream of playing against the best. And hey, have we mentioned there's also $1 million at stake?
The total pot is $1 million.
No, that is not a typo. The prizes are unbelievably generous.
We began with thousands of players. Now only dozens remain.
There it is.
Oh my God!
Wow.
Eric Hansen!
This is crazy.
Eric Hansen moves on to the round of 32 in Armageddon fashion.
The CGC knockout phase has arrived. There are those who played their way in, and some are here thanks to their well-earned reputations. No matter who you are, things are about to get very, very real.
What? I just put her tonight? What?
A trip to the CGC finals and a clean shot at the largest first place prize of the year. My friends, it's the CGC round of 64. Who will take the next step to Toronto?
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to day 2 of the Chess.com Global Championship. We are in the knockout phase. The stakes are incredibly high, and it is a pleasure to be bringing you this lovely, amazing event. I'm your host, Grandmaster Daniel Naroditsky. Alongside me today, the one and only Grandmaster, Aman Hambleton. Aman, good afternoon to you. How excited are you for the continuation of day 2 of the CGC?
Well, hello, Dania, and hello, everybody watching. Day 2, hopefully it's as exciting as day 1, Dania, and I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, day 1 wasn't very exciting. We didn't really have any Armageddons.
No.
Really, there was not much intrigue to speak of, and I'm sure today will be the same old boring matchups. Let's start with the overall logistics. There are 64 players. There were 64 players. A couple of them have already been knocked out. Among 32 players invited by Chess.com, 32 qualifiers from the CGC play-ins that happened the last couple of months. A couple of weak players at the top, including Hikaru Duda, So, Fabi Nepo, Giri Ding, and Aronian. Nobody really strong accepted invitation to this event, and you can see who the field includes there at the bottom.
Yeah, I mean, just having so many, a variety of different world champions in different rating categories just makes this such an interesting and diverse field.
And of course, from different generations, which really adds spice. And we will get to that very shortly. The format is also relatively simple. Each match consists of 4 games. The time control is 15 minutes plus 2 seconds. And if the match ends in a 2-2 tie, then there will be an Armageddon game And we've already seen Armageddons today. We saw Vishy Anand shockingly get knocked out in an Armageddon by Russian Grandmaster Pavel Pankratov. I was on the edge of my seat, except I was in bed watching, but I guess I was on the edge of my bed, Aman. But the Armageddons really add so much spice to these matches.
I was watching that one as well, Danya. There were so many fun Armageddons yesterday as well. And I think the interesting thing about this Armageddon bidding process is, chess players are great. We've been studying the game for a long time. We know the theory. I think this bidding process is relatively new. Like, we've seen it before, but I think players actually have a lot to learn about what the correct bid is, and they're getting used to what time is just impossible to play with and what's too much.
For sure. Well, let's quickly review the matchups for today. We've got some mouthwatering matchups indeed, as I said, from all different generations. David Navara against Michael Adams. Dmitry Andreikin faces off against Armenian GM Aram Hakobian. Very strong player, by the way. That is not going to be an easy one for Dmitry. And I think two crowd favorites, Vladimir Fedoseev, who has made a name for himself the last couple of months with dazzling performances all around in the RCC and in the Fischer random qualifiers. And he is facing off against the legend, Gada Kamsky. So the field is totally stacked him on. We will not be able to, we will be pulled apart in all directions.
Yeah, I mean, this is a really exciting day. Like, you kind of have a little bit of a generational battle, right? I love to see Michael Adams in there, Kamsky as well. You kind of have these seasoned veterans that are still so competitive at the game, and some young players that have a lot to prove. So there's storylines on both sides.
There absolutely are so many amazing matches indeed. Oh my God, I don't know where to start with, but let's review the Group A bracket overall, as we can see who these players are going to be facing and who they are facing. We have Hikaru Nakamura in the Group A bracket. Of course, we have Navara Adams, which will be happening very shortly, Linier Dominguez, and some dude named Eric Hansen yesterday, Mon. You wouldn't happen to be acquainted with him. He played a pretty decent match, and he beat a pretty decent player.
Yeah, that's one way to put it for sure. I think if you wanted my summary, it would have a few more expletives that I'm not sure I could say on our broadcast, but I was certainly excited to call that. But Danya, I mean, the matches that are incoming, I mean, need no introduction. However, it's my understanding that you have already locked in a few predictions. I still haven't made mine, so I might give mine after, but you've already made some. Is that right?
Yes, I have. I recorded that with two dudes who I don't know very well a couple of weeks ago. Let's listen. I hate the sound of my own voice, but I have to do this. Let's listen in.
It's time to break down Group D for the Chess.com Global Championship. Levy and Danya, one of the big questions everyone is probably thinking about is, will this be the Fabiano Caruana redemption tour? Maybe not a world champion, maybe becomes the first Chess.com Global Champion. But I'll let you give your thoughts on each matchup as we jump into the bracket. We start things off with Fabiano Caruana versus Martin Kravtsev. Then we have Kirill Alexeyenko taking on Jose Martinez. Dmitry Andreikin then faces off versus Aram Hakobian. And then we have Vladimir Fedoseev versus Gada Kamsky. Levy, you get to bat leadoff in this case. Which matchup do you have circled?
Oh, without question, it's Vladimir Fedoseev versus Gada Kamsky. Of course, we go back to a previous generation. Gada Kamsky was just an absolute savage. You saw him paired in the same tournament you were going to. You shuddered a little bit. An absolute legend. He still plays constantly to this day. He keeps up with all the best names. And Fedoseev needs no introduction either. He is constantly winning all sorts of events. A very, very tough opponent. I'm looking forward to that one.
Danya, your thoughts?
Well, Fabiano Caruana, Danny, you mentioned that he's been struggling. It's no secret that he's been struggling mightily over the past couple of tournaments, and I think he's going to bring his absolute A game. I'm very excited to see how he handles his first round matchup against Martin Kravtsev, who is no pushover at all. He did a great job in the World Blitz Championship. It's going to be a fascinating first round battle for Fabiano.
I love the matchups you guys chose. I want to highlight that Jose Martinez and Dmitry Andreikin are
Dmitry Andreikin, you heard it there first. I got to pick on
well
Danny. That's part of my job responsibility I'm on.
Hey,
That's
listen, and
hard.
some people have the nerve to say you don't have the best job in the world.
Some people do. I don't know who those people are, but the crazy thing is, so we have some incredible prizes on top of all of these amazing players, as if just the prospect of defeating a former or current world champion is not enough. The top prize in the entire tournament is a whopping $200,000. That is a number, Aman, which we are going to throw around and remind people of many, many more times. This is the biggest prize by a country mile ever in an online event. And that's not the only prize, $100K for second place and handsome prizes all around. Ain't that an amazing time that we live in?
What kind of complaint can you lodge when you're getting 100,000 as a runner-up, Daniel? That's a pretty spiffy prize, and I like to see that actually every competitor does get paid. And look, you're making $5,000 a match all the way up, so a lot of money at stake even for this one match in these matches that we're going to witness today.
Absolutely, and the players at the bottom, they'll go home with $5,000, enough to buy a used car, maybe not really a down payment in the U.S. anymore, but still a very handsome amount indeed. And the top prize, that is definitely enough for a down payment. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, before we start the show, before we start the games, we want to remind you that it is not too late to still fill out your bracket. Of the thousands and thousands of brackets filled out, I believe there's something like 5 perfect brackets remaining. No, I apologize, you cannot submit your bracket anymore, but there's only 5 or so perfect brackets, and my guess is that after today, that number might be closer to 0.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing to keep note of today is that obviously, as brackets do, winners or rather favorites are usually picked as winners, and if any of these favorites lose today, we could have no perfect brackets, Dania, by the end of today's show. So that'll be something to keep an eye on.
It definitely will, and much like in March Madness, the problem is that everybody's incredibly good. Yes, there are favorites. Yeah. Yes, there are players we expect to win. We expect Andreikin, for example, to go far. But guess what? Pavel Pokratov beat Vishy Anand. I love Vishy. I'm a huge fan of Vishy. But it's not that I'm not surprised, Aman, but I think you understand what I'm saying. Any grandmaster in this field is capable of going really far. And I might be surprised, but I won't be shocked.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I want to highlight, because I love the format of the Chess.com Global Championship. It reminds me of the World Cup. I think there should be more knockout events in chess. It's just, edge of your seat entertainment. You get these Armageddons where you can see, just like March Madness, you'll see a team, you'll see a player that's ranked pretty low at the beginning of the event, and they could make a Cinderella run all the way to the finals and stuff like that. I mean, storylines like that, really, really exciting to watch. So I'm sure we'll see stuff like that in this tournament.
Yeah, and I make it no secret that I am a big fan of the players from the older generation. I was sad to see Boris Gelfand go in the morning. Props, of course, to Noterbeck for another excellent match. The guy is in an absolute roll in every way possible. He's totally unstoppable. But I would love it if somebody from the older generation made their way, somebody like Michael Adams, somebody had that Cinderella run that you mentioned and made their way to your home country, Aman, for the finals.
Yeah, no, it's a very, very special place in my heart, Dania. Live finals in Toronto. So I think that the first matchup, that is on between Andreikin and Hakobian is one that I think you went out on a bit of a predicted limb. You have Andreikin in this one, is that right?
I know. I'm taking a big risk, and I'm predicting Dmitry Andreikin. He hasn't really been successful in online tournaments before. So really, I'm predicting a departure from the standard. But in all seriousness, Aram Hakobian, maybe a slightly less familiar name, Aman, to a lot of chess fans. I've played him a lot in Online Blitz. Super dangerous player. Good opening preparation. He's fast, and he's unbelievably tactically sharp. He's got that Armenian school. You do not want to mess with him in sharp positions.
Yeah, I was going to say basically the same thing. Both seen him compete online, played against him online. This is an online format where obviously Andreikin is comfortable. He has, weekly success when it comes to Title Tuesday and these kind of regular cash events on chess.com. But Hakobian, in terms of an underdog, definitely someone that, in the case of like an Armageddon, a time scramble, anything like that, you put him right up there with as good chances as anyone. So I think Andreikin will definitely want to avoid a situation where there's maybe no increment getting into Armageddon. So he'll probably look to put this away in the 4 matches, but Hakobian's no joke. So I'm really excited to see if this game gets tactical, because Andreikin kind of has that opposite style. Very grindy, very solid, and doesn't usually give too much of an advantage to his opponents.
Yeah, although in must-win situations, we've seen Andreikin roll out the Sicilian, so he's a chameleon in that regard. He can definitely camouflage as a tactical player, but I agree completely. At his heart, there's no question that he is positionally minded. He's won some incredible positional games. I remember his game against Hikaru from the RCC semifinals. I mean, the guy is a boa constrictor, and Aram, he has to try to make it as messy as possible. And we are underway with Dmitry Andreikin owning the white pieces in game 1. And true to his style, Aman, super positional, anti-theoretical. He pushes c3 in this position, leading to a very quiet kind of Grunfeld type structure.
Sorry, so does he have white? Andreikin is white, you're saying?
Andreikin is white.
Okay,
Andreikin
maybe
is white.
We'll get that flipped around.
We'll get that fixed. We will get that flipped around. But
there we go. Andreikin with the white pieces.
There we go. And also Aram, I mean, the moment that Aram plays this opening with white is the moment that the Earth becomes a supernova and explodes. Like maybe when he's 85 years old, but Aram's an E4 guy through and through. So what do you make of this?
No, I mean, slow kind of start. I mean, the G3 bishop G2 setup coupled with just C3 from white is almost like a combination of a few different styles. If you're more of a Catalan-minded structure, that pawn would be on C4, probably before Black plays the move C5. And the London style of getting the bishop to F4 with these Collie systems, well, then you wouldn't really fianchetto the bishop on G2. So I feel like he's kind of put everything together a little bit, and it's this really solid position. But without the move E4, what's white going to do next? Because that bishop on C1 needs a place to go. Yeah,
white needs to add a little bit of fuel to the fire. And that is exactly what Dmitry Andreikin does. We have a trade on E4. You can see how quickly Aram is playing. He is not hesitating at all as he grabs the pawn on D4. And I'm going to be totally honest with you, man. I'm not super impressed with the way that Dmitry is handling the opening. I feel like after knight takes D4, maybe knight C5, there's no question in my mind that Black is not worse, but maybe that's Dmitry's strategy. Just get an equal position that's not theoretical, and outplay his opponent. He's done that so many times. He's perfected that approach, and he takes back with a pawn.
Very interesting decision. I can say pawn takes would pretty much not be on my radar, Dania. I'll admit that. Definitely knight takes. I mean, knight C5, you called it. But as you're highlighting, knight F6, and what we should know is when we've got that weakness to play against, isolated pawn especially, control the square in front of it is the tried and true method to play against these weaknesses. So knight on D5, you might see later B6, bishop B7, perhaps pawn to E6, and everything controlling that D5 square. Just looks like easy play for Black. It's not like Black's winning, by no means, but just looks easy for Hakobian out of the opening.
Pretty sure Black's winning. Pretty much resignable for Dmitry at this point.
Isolated pawn, that's game over, right?
Well, we had back in my hometown club in San Francisco, we had a player, great guy, he's an owner of a local pizza shop, but he had a phobia of doubled pawns. And this is a serious story. He was so afraid of doubled pawns that he would literally rather give up a piece than accept doubled pawns. And again, I'm not exaggerating here. He was 1700, pretty good player, but it was just this outsized pathology. So hopefully Dmitry does not share the same phobia about isolated queen pawns. But there we see Aram navigating his knight over to D5, and it's clear that Black has solved the lion's share of his opening problems. Maybe bishop E6, bishop D5 can be considered as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, bishop. I mean, b6 right now is a bit of a stretch, so you would need to play knight d5 to block the h1 a8 diagonal before you consider something like b6. But on the other hand, white can get that knight into the e5 square. It's very well supported. And the one thing about controlling the d5 square is you actually aren't putting much pressure on the d4 pawn. So white can kind of use that to his advantage, playing knight e5. And now that the knight's moved to d5, I also maybe think about h4, h5, just kind of playing against that king side a little bit as an option.
Yeah, it feels like, yes, on the surface, black has the IQP blockaded, which is almost always a good sign, but initial energy in his pieces, the bishop on g2, the queen on b3, putting pressure on the knight, knight e5 is already a possibility. And I think a key question, Aman, as you've been alluding to, is whether black can get away with the move b6. And my heart says no, but my brain actually says maybe. Knight e5, scary, but after bishop b7, I think black is holding on.
Right.
And
it's one of
Aram
those
shares
moves
that sentiment.
Yeah, it just feels a little off. Like b6, whoa, white just played queen b3 to put pressure on the knight on d5, and then you just open up the diagonal, but your bishop's going to arrive on b7, and wow, h4 immediately. So as soon as b6 was played, h4, now the knight can't really return to f6, and the bishop certainly can't go to g4. Knight e5 would come in really quickly. So h4 seems maybe well-timed. Like, if he gets h5, that's always a little bit annoying, but can go to h6, and I think I like the prospects on the king side.
And h5 played immediately without hesitation. Andreikin's one of those players whom, when you play him, you always feel like you're getting outplayed, even if you know that objectively the position is equal. And I'm already getting that sense here that Andreikin just is seeming to squeeze more juice out of the position, even though Aram is making all of the natural developing moves. He's doing exactly what the doctor ordered, putting the knight on d5 like a good, Soviet schoolboy. And yet, the prospect of h6 and knight e5 does look quite uncomfortable here.
Yeah, and it's the pin from the g2 bishop to the b7 bishop after knight e5 is very tough to get out of. Black's queen will constantly be harassed on the c file. It's difficult to find space for the pieces. And notice how white's bishop on c1 hasn't even developed, but it feels like one of white's best pieces as well. It can go to g5, d2. It's supporting h6. It's doing a lot for not having moved.
Yeah, I actually wouldn't rule out the possibility of g takes h5. I know it looks completely brazen, but I would be very, very worried about allowing h6 because that creates a major precedent on the king side. That creates long-term attacking chances that black, I don't think, can afford in a situation like this. He could get overextended very quickly. Now, after gh, maybe white can consider knight h4, knight f5, but a timely e6 can address that problem. Am I crazy, Aman, for considering this move?
Maybe crazy for unrelated reasons, Dania, but as far as g takes h5,
that I don't argue with.
G takes h5 is one of those moves that no matter, you could calculate it and you could calculate correctly that it's fine to take it, but your brain will never allow you to feel good about doing it. So it's one of those things I feel like you just regret afterwards, no matter what. I probably wouldn't take it, but one thing that works in black's favor is the queen b3 move. Right? You've gone queen b3, so it's a little harder to get back over to take on h5, queen d1, queen takes h5. So it was a serious option, and maybe queen d6 afterwards would have been nice. Dania, do you think this is too much, allowing pawn to h6? That's a long-term issue for the king.
I think it's a mistake, and not because the eval bar went up. I wasn't looking at the engine eval. Totally, I would never, ever do that. But it just seems to me that after knight e5, it's hard to say exactly in which situation the pawn on h6 is going to bear fruit, but it just feels like 10, 15 moves down the line, something's going to happen where black is going to regret allowing that pawn to get to h6. Now, the big question for Dmitry is what to do with this knight, because knight e5 isn't the only way to activate it. You could also, in some situations, try to go knight g5, knight e4, or you could leave the knight on f3 and save knight e5 for a rainy day.
Right. Yeah, bishop d2 was played, just covering the b4 square, allowing the rooks to connect, and obviously rook to c1, maybe challenging the only open file. But I like knight e5. I feel like it should be played in general, and I think the other interesting thing about the h6 pawn is sometimes you push this pawn to h6, and it's maybe both sides have a claim to it. h6 could be very strong, restricting the king, back rank mate issues. But on the other hand, the pawn is a little bit weak because maybe it can be targeted by black. In this case, I don't see the pawn as weak at all. I don't see how black's going to take it. So that's why I think the pawn on h6 benefits white more than it could be a weakness.
And you made a great point earlier about the dark-squared bishop kind of being the unsung hero of white's position. A big reason why is precisely that it is anchored for life to the h6 pawn. And I guess the rainy day has arrived because Dmitry has positioned his knight on e5. Now, the move e6 is typical in such positions, but it further exacerbates the problems on the king side. So I think Aram is going to try to make do without that move.
Right. And, this definitely needs some, I guess, some checking calculation-wise. But I do like first of all, I love the move rook c7. But I was thinking maybe e6 and knight e7 is a kind of slow idea where your bishop's now defended on b7. You'd love that trade of bishops. And the knight might want to make its way to the f5 square, where suddenly we were talking about how you blockade the pawn. But now if you switch to attacking that pawn head on, it's actually kind of difficult for white to defend.
No, that's absolutely true. And I think for that reason, Dmitry, he feels a sense of urgency and he strikes on the other side of the board. A classic Dmitry Andreikin, a4. Now he wants to do the same thing with the other pawn, except I don't think he wants to move it all the way up to a6. I think he wants to leave it on a5 in order to exert long-term pressure against black's b6 pawn. And black just continues to get more and more overextended. Maybe Aram should play e6 and knight e7, but another problem with that idea is that the bishop could jump into b4 as soon as the knight leaves d5.
And I mean, they talk, Dania, and they talk about how you're supposed to control the center, play in the center. And here we've got one of the strongest grandmasters in rapid chess playing h4, h5, h6, maybe a4, a5, a6. So a lot to learn, I think, even for myself.
Yeah, I mean, Dmitry has such an inspirational style. He's up on the clock by 3 minutes now and looks like he's got great chances to win game one. Shall we have a brief look at the other games which have begun and are also featuring some really interesting openings?
Definitely.
That's more of a rhetorical question. I don't think anybody's ever said
Dania,
no.
We shouldn't. Shall we? No, are you kidding me? I love watching this a-pawn go up the board.
How dare you even propose to look at David Navara and Michael Adams? So David Navara against Michael Adams, with David handling the white pieces. And Michael Adams, honestly, one of my favorite players, one of my favorite people in chess. Total class act. He's been 2,700 for millennia, it seems. And he's one of those guys who I just love to see going far in this tournament.
And are we actually maybe witnessing the match between two of the nicest people in chess? I think these might be the two nicest people, period. David Navara, I mean, he's actually won like a sportsmanship award before, because I think there was like a World Cup or something where these like touch move incidents and stuff like that, and he's just always so gracious, like time and time again, giving his opponents like a draw, and very classy guy.
And he's not fake. I mean, it's so genuine. I was
it's not
staying on the same floor as him in at a tournament, I think in the Czech Republic, and you just always hold the elevator door open for you. Always says hi, and he's a polyglot. He'll say hi in your language, and just puts a smile on your face and lets his moves do the talking. Like exactly. So what do we have here? Michael has the bishop pair, but it's not clear whether the bishop pair here is a strength or a weakness. What do you make of this position? I kind of like black's position here.
Yeah, it's so the interesting thing is that the pressure is now arriving on the e5 knight, and if, let's just say, the pawn gets thrown back, and f4 pawn, e5 knight, and d6 bishop disappear, so there's some exchange, black maybe wins a pawn there, then I think the attacking chances for black with opposite bishops are really serious. So I think that's like a potential danger for white's position here. And black's moves are really easy to find, really easy to play. Like the next couple moves, I think that's a really undervalued thing in rapid matches, certainly blitz or time scrambles. Just having an easy position with a simple plan to follow. So I like that about Black's position. But yeah, the b7 bishop after the move c4, we have to be careful, Danya, that we don't forget about it and focus on winning that pawn, because if you leave the structure like this, that bishop on b7 might not see the light of day.
Yeah, that's a good point. If we bring up an analysis board here, rook a e8 would justify the move c4. The knight would drop back to d3. And like you're saying, Aman, you could end up in a situation where the bishop has literally zero long-term prospects, while White's star-squared bishop could be deployed to b2, and all of a sudden the tables kind of turn. So Adams, without any hesitation, takes on Passant. But really the important moment is now. What exactly is Navara planning on rook a8 in this position? Because now knight d3 is no longer possible. You drop the d5 pawn. I'm curious.
So what about c4?
Here.
You know, like let's say c4, and I want to give the pawn and say that maybe my bishop is better. So takes, and maybe bishop b2.
Bishop b2, essentially forcing the trade, and you get a position like this. Like you're saying, opposite colored bishops in the middle game, totally different kettle of fish from opposite colored bishops in the end game. Could not be two more distinct types of positions.
Yeah, and you know, just check the diagonals, right? b7 bishop biting on granite there, and b2 bishop is gorgeous. So while this might be perhaps close to equal, in a rapid match, I don't think White's really ever complaining taking something like this. So I think that is just a fallback plan for White. They know they can play that opposite bishop position with no risk.
And so for that reason, Adams, who values piece activity, he has such an amazing intuition in all sorts of positions. He pushes his own pawn to c4, ensuring that the d5 pawn remains a target, to which David responds rook b1. And once again, the question arises, is the time ripe for rook a to e8?
And I see we've actually settled it, Danya. I don't know if you're aware, but the results are in. According to the chat, David Navara is nicer. So that settles that, and that's official now.
Yeah, but how many bots that David Navara deployed, how many bots voted in this election?
He's too nice to do that, though. He would never. That's
true. or so you would think. In fact, he's put on this entire facade for years in order to win this Twitch poll.
Yeah, it's what it's all about for him. Yeah.
Okay, rook a8. Now, don't play queen d4.
Hey, I thought of it. I got to raise my. I at least considered it.
Guilty. So, what does David do exactly? Now, technically, bishop e5 and rook e5 isn't a threat at the present moment because the bishop on b7 is going to hang.
Right.
But the threat, I guess, is queen c5 check, or even bishop c5 and d6. So there's a sense in which White's position is pretty flimsy.
Yep. I definitely see what you mean. And I think that if you just put the move like bishop e3 on the board, bishop e3, and like if we do this mass exchange once again, White has this dream of bishop e5, pawn takes, maybe rook takes e5, bishop d4, and you know, even rook takes rook and bishop takes d5. Just want to like point out that even in these positions where Black's ahead a whole pawn, bishop on d4, supported by the pawn on c3, pressure on g7, I think White's chances are as good as Black's, maybe even better. So don't get tricked in thinking, okay, Black's up a pawn, they're playing for the win, because sometimes that can't be further from the truth.
Without question. And the other thing in White's favor is the fact that if you have a bishop on d4, Black's pawn majority in the center is going to be totally immobilized. Also, I'm embarrassed to admit, all of this time I didn't realize that White was up a pawn to begin with. I didn't count the pawns. So that actually changes a lot, and definitely in White's favor. Now I'm a lot less worried about bishop takes c5 happening.
Yeah, because what we just witnessed, the line that I was just mentioning, that's me giving you 2 pawns and still being fine. So that's right. Yeah. I was in a good position to start with.
No, I was counting, and I'm like, Black should be up 2 pawns. So I'm looking at the pawn majorities, and I'm saying, well, there's only one pawn majority. There's C and D pawn against C pawn. Where's the other one? That's when I realized, forgot to do my arithmetic.
And that speaks to the compensation. Whenever you see that eval bar hovering around the center point, if it's 0.00 and you're down a pawn, already that's amazing compensation. Usually that's an indication that you'd probably rather play the side that's down the material because your chances are going to be very high.
Yeah, I think the possibility of a draw here is pretty high. I think we are going to see bishop takes c5 at some moment, and we might see a queen trade. We might see black end up being up a pawn, but white having a pretty foolproof fortress. So we'll keep an eye on this game as David Navara has a big decision to make in this position. There's one other game that is underway that we have not looked at yet, and that is Vladimir Fedoseev, who has the white pieces in the first match game against Gata Kamsky. And this probably is the calmest of all the positions we have thus far.
Yeah, it's I guess it's slightly better for white. I got my friend the eval bar to assure me of that. But no, just looking at the structure, you've got that e pawn for black. On its own, you just count the pawn islands, as we say in chess. White's got h2, g3, and then those 4 pawns on the queen side for white are all part of the same island. They're all connected. They all defend each other, whereas black's got 3. So the more pawn islands, as a general rule, something to help guide you to evaluate a position, the more pawn islands, generally, the worse it is.
Yeah, I suppose I was more focused on highlighting each pawn island in a different color. But you're absolutely right. The e7 pawn is a pretty major liability. White's bishops, I think, are also somewhat better positioned. And Vladimir Fedoseev improves his position by bringing up the king. But I think this is one of Gata's greatest strengths. He is a magician of an endgame player. And I think that if he handles his time well, he should be able to hold a draw here.
Definitely. Yeah, the position is also simplified to a degree where there's not a lot of complication. It's not going to be a very tactical game. And if you look at the breaks, the pawn breaks, they're few and far between, especially for white. If we're saying white is slightly better and white's the one playing for something, well, where do you play? There's no b4, b5 break. The only pawn break that looks like you could achieve something with is maybe d5. So that's a long process, right? That's maybe, getting bishop c2, b3, rook d1, c4, d5, and all that for what? It's not even clear that after you do it, you'll be particularly happy. So I do think that Gata, he's got this idea maybe of even king e6, speaking of brazen moves. He'd love to trade light square bishops. I think that's a big takeaway I have from this position. When I see the pawn structure, black's queenside pawns, cemented on light squares, white's on dark squares, I do want to get rid of the light square bishops from the board as black.
And I think he would probably also like to play e7, e5 to eradicate his extra pawn island in a good version, of course. But the other thing I think he should be concerned with is the prospect of some sort of a pawn storm on the king side. And that's why I like the move h6. He's setting up a situation where if Fedoseev plays h4, it's a classic situation that we see in the middle game too. If h5, then g5. If g5, then h5. There's actually a Russian term for this type of structure where, and it's infuriating, especially when you're attacking, because you literally cannot open up the position.
Yeah, exactly. And to demonstrate what you're saying, like if you just take back the move h6 and leave the pawn on h7 and give black some move, rook e8, h4, rook, and then now h5, and we can see how white forcefully opens something up, whether it's g takes h5, the g file is in use, or whether it's h takes g6 from white next turn and the rook goes to the h file. So yeah, you make a great point. Exactly. when you need to open things up, from white's perspective, you want some sort of pawn that you can attack. But h6 is a great way to meet that.
The one redeeming factor that I think gives Vladimir that small edge is the prospect of securing a stronghold for his light squared bishop on g6. If he plays h5, yes, Gata's going to keep the position closed to g5, but white's bishop is going to land a pretty nice outpost on g6, and maybe some sort of attack against black's king is not totally out of the question. White still has a lot of firepower to work with, and he's also up 3 minutes on the clock. So Gata is going to have to be accurate as he tries to hold and secure the half point in this game. I want to go back, with your permission, to the Andreikin game because we've had a lot of transformations there.
Yeah, and also I think that game is definitely the one with the most substance in it at the moment, because the other two positions are actually kind of similar. Bishops on the board, very cemented pawn structures, but here imbalances and serious problems maybe for Black's king. We've highlighted that h6 pawn, from so many moves ago. It's still there. The king is, potentially in a mating net in the future, and we have the classic imbalance, knight against bishop.
Yeah, now the dark-scarred bishop is absent for Black, which means that the moment White lands a queen on the long diagonal and clears the long diagonal up, maybe by pushing d5, there's going to be concrete mate threats, maybe for the first time this game. The difficulty is logistically setting up a situation where you have access to that square. I would not rule out the move d5 in this position, but it comes with a lot of risk, and the eval bar doesn't like it, which is a lot more important.
Not
I think sure exactly
the reason
why,
but I think the reason that you're interested in d5 is like, let's say, the opposite side. If Black gets to play e6 and then sticks a knight on d5, then the knight covers the f6 square. Yes, the Black king is still in danger. The dark squares are really weak, but that d5 knight is so strong.
And Dimitri with a very brazen move, bishop g5. Now, importantly, f6 is illegal. The pawn is pinned by White's queen. But knight e6 looks pretty darn unpleasant. d4 is hanging. The bishop is under fire. And is Dimitri just trying to bail this game out?
I think so. I have no aspirations to win this game as White anymore after this, because all the endgames, the h6 pawn will be quite weak, and I think it's possible I have to maybe check some lines here, but I think it's possible Black even can try to play for something.
f5 basically imprisons the rook, and Aram plays it. And I think Dimitri overlooked that move, and now he's going to have to be really, really careful. How do you extricate that rook from g5? Now e6. Okay, then you take it and go rook g3. Oh, barely.
Yeah, or d5, weird move. King. I guess king f7.
DE king f6, and White has f4 to the rescue. And then you pray.
Yeah, but then the rook comes down to c2, and I don't know what the heck's happening here. But this is definitely not
a 3-result game.
Exactly. Dmitry Andreikin isn't sitting there in the previous position going, okay, I'll do this move, and we'll trap my rook, and okay, perfect. Like, he's not happy to be here.
But I'm worried about Aram's clock, and I'm worried about the prospect of White taking the h7 pawn and creating a far advanced passer on h6. I think f takes g4 is a very savvy decision because it keeps the position relatively simple. And now a big choice for Dimitri. He can go rook b5. He can go rook e5. I definitely would not be inclined to recapture that pawn, because then the rook is ridiculously passive.
That's right. I think if rook b5, we'll probably see rook c6 by Black, and then the e6 pawn can be picked up. And then king g3, king takes g4 is the preferred way to recapture that pawn, compared to rook takes g4, where the rook doesn't have any no follow-up moves.
And I'm trying to get a finger on the pulse of that position. Is it just a dead draw, or does White have some sort of, symbolic chances there? My guess is the former. I think it's just a fortress.
The rook on b5 is nice because rook e5 is also rook e5, rook e8, and I think Black is always okay with these pawn end games.
Oh yeah, if I can just make these moves really quickly. In fact, most pawn end games are out of the question for White, because you'll get a situation where Black's king tosses White's king out of g4, and finally the weakness of h6 spells White's doom. So
that would be particularly ironic. We're talking about how dangerous that pawn may be for Black, and then it loses the game.
Yeah, a rather sad finale that would be. And Dimitri, after a prolonged think, sort of acquiesces to what I think is going to be a pretty easy hold, despite the 40 seconds that Aram has. He goes rook c4, though. a more forcing option, and probably no
Yeah,
worse, if not better, than rook c6.
Maybe you have the option, b3, even rook b4 can be considered. So I think he's just gonna, Andreikin's gonna take the opportunity.
Oh, there's e7 and rook takes g6, but to the rescue comes rook takes f4.
That's pretty funny, yeah. Because it's not something that you would necessarily calculate, but then you probably have this mini, heart jump where you're like, wait, okay, wait, yeah, no, it's all right.
And then you remember that you don't actually have to recapture anything in chess, but rook b7 is quite a bit more dangerous. And Aram just has one more problem left to solve, which is to make sure that h6 pawn doesn't squeak by the guards. And
he doesn't have a lot of time. Sometimes these basic rook end games, we're sitting here saying the word basic. Okay, we have a nice little 0.00 confirmation bar, but it's easy with 30 seconds on the clock to completely get in your own head.
Oh, totally. Especially when you're playing someone like Dmitry. Fedoseev and I the other day actually were discussing how good Dmitry is in sowing the seeds of doubt in your mind when you think everything is solved, and all of a sudden you start freaking out. You've got 20 seconds and there's some sort of unforeseen problem. And King G3, Aman, I think, is a great example of that, trying to keep the tension as much as possible. And now King takes G4, and I think Rook B4 should hold handily.
Right.
Or maybe Rook H7. What exactly does Black do on Rook H7?
So Rook H7, I guess. Rook A1, is that the idea?
I was making that move, and Dmitry made it for me. F5.
Yeah.
With the idea, King takes F5, Rook G7, and the pawn squeaks by. Oh my God, what does Black do?
These are the seeds of doubt you were talking about.
But Aram is so careful here. Rook B4, Rook A7.
And I think
or
you
maybe
check
Rook G7.
And get your Rook to H4. So you check B3, get back to B4, and go Rook H4.
Or in this case, you actually can just straight away get to H3.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point.
Same idea. So one way or another, you're either going to get to B8 or you're going to get to the H file. And
I was going to say, yeah, so I like Rook A7. Rook A7, and now you can go H7, take A5 with check, maybe go back to A7, and it's like, maybe that pawn endgame is like winning or something.
Oh, and then you start pushing the B pawn.
yeah, it just could be. There's some chances here. That's what I'm saying. Not quite dead just yet.
Whoa,
I was wondering whether to start by taking check.
But if you start by taking on A5, then I creep up to H7 with my king.
That's right. So I think we do have to push that pawn.
For sure. I think H7 is the most testing option. That Black has a big decision to make. You can go Rook B8, or you can stop the pawn from behind. Maybe both moves draw, but you don't know that.
I think the point though is Rook B3, Rook takes B2 check, and Black will just keep checking the king unless you stay on the G file to cover, Rook H1, Rook H2, or Rook H3. And if you do stay on the G file, you're going to get checked forever. So I think Andreikin just kind of noticed that and said, okay, that's the last trick, and it doesn't really exist.
Squeezing every drop, as you're saying, out of the position. But this is elementary. Yeah, if he loses this, I think you can take the pawn. I'm not sure, though. He's still trying.
yeah, exactly. He's still some checkmate in one,
Still fighting. Okay, now I think, there we go. Rook F4, trade of rooks and bare kings. And we have one game remaining. By the way, Navara Adams also ended in peace, kind of as we suspected, but the Fedoseev game is getting pretty wild.
It is. There's, I think I alluded to the fact that there were no real pawn breaks for white. And I think white was quite, Fedoseev, I think he was offended. He heard that and he was like, no, I'm going to show you that B5 is actually playable.
I'm going to make it my life's mission. What a move. Striking at the square that is defended the most times on the chessboard.
Amazing, really.
So the point, and correct me if I'm wrong, if CB, then bishop takes B7. If bishop B5, I think Vladimir might want B3. All of a sudden, threatening C4. And Black's bishop experiences difficulties finding a safe haven.
That's right. And if you start to look for like safe squares, bishop f1, you might get chased around the board with like rook a1.
Oh, no, c5's panic. The eval bar shoots up. What's the move?
I wonder, because sometimes, like, okay, I mean, we can just take it, right? And b7 is next to fall. Like, guys, d takes c5 first.
But then bishop takes c3.
And then rook takes b5 and bishop b7. Is that a thing?
Or you could start by taking on b7 and basically saying, hey, I'm controlling all of these squares. So black's rook has no good squares, and white's just going to mop up the rest of black's queen side, upon which you're just going to get a free extra passer on b3.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And Goddess Clock is, I think, going to do him in, regardless of the evaluation, increment or not. You can't survive this with 20 seconds.
Yeah, and especially the position is no longer solid, right? We've okay, e6. I don't know why that's an advantage, though.
By the way, bishop d5 check, forcing a couple more seconds off Goddess Clock.
Yeah, I think e6 there was my first instinct, but he gave his opponent, you know, an opportunity to make a decision. And when time's ticking, you don't want to have choices. You want to have only moves.
No, choices are the worst because choices cause panic.
Yep.
DC. I don't see Gata pulling this one out. He's going for your option.
Yeah.
Rook takes b5. Excellent
And
idea.
hey, this works a lot better now that the king's on g7. That king being one square further, it actually really matters in this line.
But the bishops are just like rolling out the red carpet here. You're going to go c6, just as you said, drop the bishop back. And even if black can find a way, Aman, to give the bishop away for the c-pawn, those positions with two bishops against a rook are completely winning.
Yeah.
99 times out of 100, especially if you can keep the b-pawns alive.
That's right. So black will be, you know, trying to play rook f1, rook b1 to win the b-pawn and sack the bishop, but I don't think Fedoseev's going to make his life that easy.
Yeah, that's when I like have 10 minutes before an appointment and I haven't showered, I haven't brushed my teeth. And in my mind, I'm like, I'm going to do this, and this. But he's got no time and he tries to bring his king up.
So bishop
and he's
b6,
going to try to bring his
bishop
king
e5.
down to d7.
Is there bishop d4? Bishop b6, bishop e5, bishop d4? Because, you know, the crazy thing...
e6. Pawn endgame is winning for white.
The pawn endgame is winning for white. And I think that's just a sad realization that maybe both players are having right now.
But isn't there king e6 here?
Mm-hmm.
And after c7, king d7. And black hangs on by a thread.
Mm-hmm.
King e4 by Fedoseev. Black's king is boxed in. It's Zoom
that's a nasty move. Time is also very much a part of this experience. But I don't think this is a case where you're like, oh, if I had lots of time, I would have been fine here. Because this looks like no amount of time would really save you.
And I actually think, Aman, if black just makes a waiting move, perhaps the simplest is to drop the bishop back to a6, collect the pawn on b5, and then return. White's totally dominating despite being an exchange down. What a beautiful concept by Vladimir to play b5. The guy is a monster. In any position, he finds a way to add Tabasco sauce, doesn't he? Whew.
No, that's a good way to put it. And obviously, decisive result here. It's the way that Fedoseev wants to start. But I gotta, just think of that move b5. So visual from early on in this game. I was even saying, eating my own words, there's no break on b5. And if he actually got to play it successfully, then it's probably a very strong move.
Well, you caused it. I mean, you inspired him to find this move through anger. But before we go on a break, let's quickly review the results. We've had 2 draws in Andreikin against Hakobian. A great result for the Armenian Grandmaster, holding Andreikin in game 1 with black, and Navara Adams' combative game, but similarly ending in a draw. And Vladimir Fedoseev striking first against the FFL Kamsky. But the intrigue, ladies and gentlemen, is far from over. We've got 3 more match games to be played, and we will continue on the other side of this break. We hope you're enjoying day 2 of the Chess.com Global Championship. We'll be back with more CGC action in just a couple moments. Stay tuned. back to the round of 64 here at the Chess.com Global Championship. We are one game through in this second batch of knockout matches here alongside Grandmaster Aman Hamilton. Aman, tons of intrigue already. 2 games ended in a draw. 1 game ended decisively, but all of the games were super combative.
Yeah, they were. And, you know, in these 4-game matches, often you'll see players just kind of feeling each other out at the beginning. Like, you know, what openings am I going to take a lot of risks in? I don't want to go crazy at the start of this match. See what kind of time management I have and my opponent has. So usually, you know, early on, the matches are not too crazy. But at the same time, I think that game between Andreikin and Hakobian was actually really imbalanced. It just worked out to be a draw. But it's not like that result came from, oh yeah, trade everything off the board. And honestly, one of the games I thought was going to be a draw was Gata and Vladimir, right? That game looked like, you know, it was trademark Gata Kamsky, but it didn't work out that way.
Yeah, the one game you're like, this is classic Gata. It's just a solid position. You know, White's never going to break through. That's precisely the game where White breaks through. And amazing endgame ingenuity, as usual, by Vladimir Fedoseev. An exchange sacrifice, a breakthrough. That was just a textbook game that should be studied by anyone who wants to gain knowledge of how to crack someone as solid as Gata in a near equal endgame. But great stuff by Fedoseev. The good news for Gata is that there are 3 games remaining. We've already seen some pretty crazy comebacks, some on-demand wins among in the earlier batches of games. And I'm pretty sure that we're going to have more intrigue here.
I mean, how could you not be playing for these on-demand wins? I mean, the prizes, Dania. If there's money on the line, people are going to be playing out of their minds. Like, it's a $5,000 match. Leave it all out there. We've seen some serious comebacks, as you've said. You know, with some players down, you know, early, you know, and coming back and then taking it to Armageddon and potentially winning that. It's a nice storyline to follow. But I think it explains why some of these players are playing so hard. This is a $5,000 match you're watching.
It most certainly does, and it most certainly is. And speaking of matches, the second match game is underway. And once again, we start with Aram Hakobian against Dmitry Andreikin. Much to my chagrin in Italian. Boy, have I not missed this opening since it made about 8 gazillion appearances in the RCC. But hey, this is what the cool kids play nowadays.
Yeah, you're looking at 2 of the coolest.
Yeah.
Knight F1 immediately. This is I've always liked this maneuver, and it's always made a lot of sense to me. Sure, if White castles and plays Rook E1, then okay, it's kind of the same thing. But there's always something that just feels a little bit correct about playing Knight F1, Knight G3 before castling. 'Cause it feels like you're saving time.
It's you signal that you're an expert in this opening. Now,
exactly.
The interesting thing is that normally White tucks the bishop away on B3, but notice how in this case White's playing with the bishop still on C4. Now, the reason you play bishop B3 is to avoid knight A5. You certainly don't want to give this bishop away unless there are extenuating circumstances. But Aman, this is clearly some major home cooking by Aram. I wonder what he wants against G5. I don't really know. Queen D2? No, he wants to sack.
No, exactly. This is extremely dangerous. And he telegraphs it, right? He's done things in a different order. And if you go back like bishop G5, Black's sitting there going, okay, bishop G4 was his Patzer move. You know, knight's on G3, dummy. You can't play bishop H4, bishop G3 now, H6. And then all of a sudden he plays bishop H4 and you're like, aha. Oh.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he could play bishop H4.
Yeah.
Now, importantly, some of you might get excited at the prospect of bishop takes F2, knight G4, but remember the bishop on H4 is also protected by the knight. So that's out of the question as well. Now, wait a second. What does Black do exactly against this very nasty prospect of knight H5, putting tremendous pressure on the knight and threatening to ruin Black's kingside pawn structure and go for checkmate?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Dania.
Yeah.
One thing that has always stuck out to me as just a backup, I don't know if this is always the way to do it, but knight C6 to B8 can make its way to d7. It never feels great to undo your development like that, but hey, if you really need to defend the f6 square, knight b8 to d7 is a maneuver that you do see in the Ruy Lopez.
So instead, he moves that very same knight, but he moves it to a5. And my guess is that with Dmitry, the kind of position that he is aiming for, and I'm fully expecting white to play knight h5, but after knight c4 dc, maybe Dmitry is intending... Wait, first of all, okay, g5 here has to be calculated, but initially I thought he might want to go for bishop g4 and basically say, all right, yes, my kingside pawn structure is ruined, but the king is going to have a pretty safe haven on h7, and with white's light squared bishop gone, it's going to be a lot harder to generate attacking chances. But sadly, the eval bar is not in agreement with this school of thought.
Well, do you want to continue that line just for a sec? So bishop g4, knight takes f6.
Sure.
Pawn takes,
G
and then just like h3, bishop h5, g4, bishop g6, knight d2, because you can kind of get this visual of the bishop on g6. White might play f3 and just say, all right, lock and key. That bishop's not playing chess for the rest of the game, and I'm going to proceed to ignore it and win on the center of the board and the queen side.
Reminds me of the famous game Winter against Capablanca, where the situation occurred with colors reversed. Exactly a bishop like this that stayed locked for the rest of the game. Well, knight h5, knight takes c4 is on the board. So big moment. So big moment here.
I was going to say, the interesting thing about this game is, don't you feel, Dania, that white is also, quote unquote, getting what they want? Like, this is the whole idea of the opening. So I got to say, like, this is a fun one. I think white's got a good game here.
Absolutely. And a decision here to be made. Does white take on f6 first, or does white keep the tension with dc? I think it would make sense to take on f6 first if that's what white wants to do anyway, because that circumvents the possibility of g5, and that is exactly what Hakobian does. And the other games, by the way, are about to begin, and as soon as they do, we will switch to Fedoseev Kamsky to catch the opening of that game. And for now, we're chilling here.
Now Kamsky with the white pieces. I wonder what the odds on a London are.
Yeah, not very high. It's not really known for that opening. Well, here we go. E4 by Gata. I like it.
Okay, the odds just went.
I mean, you could still play a London. C6, Fedoseev with the Caro-Kann. And I'm very curious what Gata will choose here.
Yeah, the more classical D4 and even E5, the advanced, is really trendy nowadays. But the two knights is always a nice, I think, almost more of a rapid chess opening way of dealing with the Caro-Kann.
Yeah, and clearly Gata is sort of going through the menu, because the menu is very extensive. I think we can all relate to this feeling when you don't necessarily have an opening or a variation that you always play, and you're sort of, do I play this? Do I play that? And you kind of know that you're going to regret your choice, whatever you play. Because whatever you play, you're going to be like, but I should have played this other line that I know better. And Gata spending a minute on move 2.
He's also fresh off a result, and I think that plays into it. Like, he's just lost a game. It's his first game with the white pieces. He probably feels a sense of urgency and pressure to make this game count. And he's probably like, okay, this is what I mainly play. I know how to play this well, but if he plays the best line against it, it's really equal, really drawish. So what spicy options do I have that are a little more maybe dubious, but also offer better chances?
So D3, I assume. I assume that Gata's going to play D3 here. We're going to wait for this move, and then we're going to switch over to the Adams-Navara game. So here I'm on, knight C3. So you were right, 2 knights Caro-Kann. It is. This game is going to go down a theoretical avenue, presumably for quite a couple of moves. And let's switch to our third game to catch the opening of that one. Talk about spicy.
Yeah, this game has already progressed. Really interesting thing about this opening. So this is like the bishop b5 check Sicilian, and honestly, this move queen g4, I've always found this move interesting. So white goes, takes c4, knight c3, and wants to play d4. And then you enjoy this kind of, if pawn takes, knight takes, Maroczy bind structure. And I think white's just, comfortable, but black has demonstrated a lot of good theory in this line. But the interesting thing is that queen to g4, which is actually the move played, this is a move that I remember I first learned this line with white, and I didn't bother to check queen g4, right? Because it's just, well, why would you? It's like black takes on d4. Okay, I'm like looking at the engine. It's fine. Queen g4 is a move that the engine does not really like. But when it's played over the board against you, suddenly you're like, wait a minute, hang on a sec. Am I losing a pawn here? And it's a really strange feeling. So it's one of these moves that you can see that eval bar is not touting. It's not super worried about this. But have you seen anyone play this like in a serious fashion, Dania? Because it is a weird feeling when all of a sudden you're legitimately getting forked.
No, it's not a pleasant feeling at all. I am aware of this move, and this move actually exists in a couple of different types of positions that are all within the bishop e5 variation. And the fact that Michael Adams is taking, I think, right around 2 minutes plus here, essentially justifies that choice already, especially if Navara has this line carefully analyzed. And trust me, David Navara does not play anything unless he's analyzed it carefully. Michael Adams takes up the gauntlet, castles kingside. And now, big question, knight takes c4 is one move, but Aman, if black is so inclined, you could also engineer a quick queen trade with cd and queen takes d1. But I guess that would violate the spirit of this line, right? It's like you
a little bit.
I don't know. You're prepared for a fight. You bring your sword to the battle, and all of a sudden you, I don't know, wither away and accept a slightly worse end game.
And I really
don't think
wonder
David's doing that.
I mean, let's say pawn takes d4. Is it slightly less forcing because it gives me maybe options like knight d5?
Ooh.
I don't know if knight d5 is the way to play, but knight takes d4 for black does seem, instead of pawn takes d4, knight takes d4 is like, okay, we're trading queens. But there's no sneaky moves to throw in.
And if we come back to that, and by the way, queen a4 check here is totally innocuous. The knight can come back to c6. If we go back to this endgame, and I think this is perhaps what David is trying to evaluate, the question is this equal or is this slightly better for white? The eval bar seems to believe that it is dead equal, and maybe after g6, Aman, one has to bear in mind that in the endgame, having all of this territory can actually be a bad thing because you don't have as many pieces with which you can protect these pawns. And this is on the board. Now, g6 was hated, despised, detested by the eval bar, even though to me, it seems like the most natural developing move. Maybe there's a tactical reason that it's bad.
I don't think I could really share why g6 is not good, but to me, also the move e6, comes to mind, and it's like, okay, e6, I want to take control of the d5 square, but I kind of want, if I could, I'd love to play a6 and e6 at the same time, because the moves knight d5 and knight d5 are both really annoying. So I think that's why he's played rook c8, because he might want something where he goes a6, e6, bishop e7, and then the c pawn is a target. e4 is always going to be loose, and it's tough to win a pawn cleanly as white.
No, it's a double-edged position, and I still maintain that g6 would sort of be the gold standard. But I agree, both e6 and g6 are to be considered. The reason that g6 was bad actually is the relatively prosaic knight b5. What I didn't realize is that somehow if you go rook c8, you just drop the pawn on a7. There's no easy way to protect the c7 square. So rook c8 not only brings the rook into the game, but it also functions as a prophylactic move to take the sting out of knight b5, as you indicated.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, you're actually threatening e5 here. Let's don't gloss over that. Pawn to e5 is a pawn.
Well, Navara almost pre-moved that.
Yeah, it's like b3 is pretty much the only move, but okay, the other moves are legal.
Like e4, e5, for example.
Yeah, at least that move would certainly make g6 look bad.
When you are hovering over a move, you haven't pre-moved it, you're hovering over it. your opponent plays like a dirty move or something you didn't expect, and even though your brain registers it, your hand doesn't really, like, you still make the move. You just like physically can't. You're careening off the train tracks too far,
exactly.
too fast.
You may as well have just
dangerous
pre-moved
thing
it,
to do.
you know?
Exactly. But anyways, Michael Adams, not exactly known among the ranks of, the dirtiest online players.
That's right.
I don't know who else belongs to those ranks, so we won't name any names.
Certainly no one in this call.
No. No, clean play only here. But is White slipping into a slightly worse position here? What do you think?
I think this is a massive success for okay, let's go back. Adams spent 3 minutes after Queen G4, right? So clearly I don't think he was, interested in going into some of the tricky positions that might arise. And if Queen G4 nets you this position with black, I mean, let's make it the main line.
Sign me up.
This looks great for black.
I think it's equal in the sense that neither side really has any clear targets. White has done a good job of protecting C4. Yeah. Maybe White will also play the move F3. And we are going to get something like a long, maneuvering endgame where anything is possible, but the objective evaluation is equality. So let's switch back to the Andreikin game real fast, because we've had a couple of changes there as well. And we have
interesting,
a somewhat stabilized position, a little bit less crazy than it was after knight h5.
Yep, and queen d7, like if you take White's pawn from f2 and put it on the f3 square, I think I'm quite optimistic for White's position, but there's going to be immediate pressure on the g4 pawn, queen d7, rook g8 coming. So I just don't think you can organize in time. But queen f5, this is, the f6 pawn is loose. And also, queen takes f5, g takes f5, rook takes g2, maybe even bishop g3.
Oh, it's on the board.
Now,
bishop g3 traps the rook.
Do you think he's planning to... I mean, it does not look like a very good sacrifice, but... Rook g8 and just grab it, right?
I think black's doing okay. That bishop on a7 is sniping at the g1 square, preventing White from coordinating the rooks. Now, I think bishop takes f6 is another possibility. Is there something that we're missing? Because the eval bar seems to believe that White's
is
in
it just long term? Is that how good the game is? Like you just go, for example, King e2 or something, like rook h3, rook h1, D1, right? It's just so good.
Well, in the long run, that makes some sense. The f6 pawn is incredibly weak. Also, you should bear in mind that should White capture on f6, and should the rook on a1 have access to the h file, there's this idea of rook takes h6 check and rook h3, for example, checkmate. And that might sound like a gimmick, but it's actually pretty hard to stop if you think about it. So my guess is that Dmitry, and he should be forgiven for this, just sort of underestimated the extent to which the pawn on f6 impacts the evaluation, and his weak king can cost him further down the line.
So do you want to even put, I think there's a great example of that. Not rook takes g2, but rook g4. And bishop takes f6, rook takes e4, king d2, and we've got your idea on the board. Rook takes h6 and rook h1 is pretty damn good. Sweet.
Ridiculous. I love endgame
and that can
tactics.
Happen so naturally.
Yeah, you just sort of, all right, queens are off the board, I'm home free, and that is exactly when the king is at its most perilous. So Andreikin takes on g2. And a big moment here for Aram, because playing a move like rook d1 is incredibly hard. Just playing a slow move like that when you're down a pawn and your opponent has just taken a pawn on the second rank requires tremendous... I don't know what the name of that skill is.
But it's tremendous.
It requires tremendous. Simply tremendous
of it.
Right. It requires tremendous.
Yeah,
Again,
I think this is a great bounce back game after sort of being under pressure. I think Hakobian has really come out guns blazing. I think it's an awesome opening idea with the white pieces. Got the position he was looking for, and I think he's given himself a real chance to win this game against Andreikin here.
And to me, the fact that he has not blitzed out the move bishop g3 tells me that he is aware that there might be a way to squeeze more out of this position than just sort of like a double-edged position where black has good compensation.
Yeah, and the more I look at bishop g3, rook g8, like rook takes g3, rook takes b2 is also there, and like black might just simply win that game.
Yeah, black might just be completely winning, actually. There.
Right, yeah, so it's like, the more I look at it, the more it's just probably he's not thinking about it at all.
Yeah, your move king e2, actually. What he might be deciding between is king e2, rook d1 to bring the rook into the game via d3, or king f1 to force black to double rooks, but make contact with the rook on g2, making it a little bit more difficult for black to gain further activity.
And maybe put them all together. King f1, right? King f1, rook g8, and then you're going rook d1.
Oh, man, he took on f6.
Okay.
And apparently this is losing.
So he wants...
I think I can tell you why.
Yeah.
Sorry to cut you off. I think it's because of bishop takes f2 check.
Right. And let's start with king e2. Yeah, let's try king
bishop
e2
h4.
First. Right. King f3.
No, not bishop h4. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. King f3. Rook g3, king f2. Yeah, and you can't move the bishop because you drop the rook.
Yeah, and the bishop's like almost like a checker piece on the side of the board. Like it's between two places.
It's just getting attacked like 800 different ways. Okay, bishop f2, he goes king f1. I guess here the move is just rook a to g8.
Simple.
And rook a to g8 happens anyway. Rook d1, it's -7. 7.
Sorry, but after king e2, rook a g8, I have rook takes h6 mate, right? Oh, but bishop h4
no, then
is
I take
check.
a bishop h4's check.
That's beautiful.
Holy smokes.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
What a gorgeous idea. Let me show that. I got to show that. If instead king e2, rook g8, maybe this is what he missed, because without this, white would have been winning. But
I think that's
I
think that's a thing you can miss. Like I think that might be it, Daniel. What do you think? Because he's got his head in his hands. He's completely dejected. He's basically blown up the whole position. What did he miss? Because he played king f1 and he doesn't look happy about it.
No, it's definitely that. It has to be that. Because bishop h4, and the irony there is that white was actually the one getting mated. And that's it.
Yeah, it is forced.
You're never, ever, ever going to have rook takes h6 again, because the bishop is going to stay anchored to that pawn. Much like in the previous game, Andreikin's bishop on d2 defended a white pawn on h6. Kind of symbolic.
It's the
and is it just over after rook takes b2?
Call the ambulance, but not for me.
I think rook takes b2 is 0-1. No. oh, takes and rook e1. Oh my God, that's so easy to blunder. Or I'm just like,
man,
too little sleep.
It's so easy to blunder, he says, hopefully.
Is it easy to blunder? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, please let it be easy.
This is how this is how the pros do it. You give a check on f2 like a civilized human, so that there's no rook e1, and now you take on b2. And this is why he's in the CGC, and I'm not.
Yeah, that is a nice touch, though. But you would have to simply notice what you were talking about as the pitfall, and then say, oh, actually, yes, I want to do that idea, but rook f2, nice way to start it off.
Well, I was showing it for as I was saying, Aman, rook takes b2 doesn't work, so therefore you should start with a check on f2, much like Dmitry did.
Similar thought process between you two, yes.
Yeah, just, the light bulb moment happened a little earlier for me than for Dmitry, but we'll forgive him that.
Yeah,
no, it's over. He's going to resign.
Is just he's had his head in his hand since that. He totally missed the idea. He saw the checkmate ideas that you and I were discussing, and he got so caught up in them that he thought they worked, right? And he had a lapse in calculation. It's too bad, but a good position spoiled, good opportunity spoiled here for White.
And preparation spoiled, right? That sometimes is the most infuriating thing when you you unravel all of this work that you did before the tournament. You get exactly what you wanted to get, and then you screw it all up, in one little misjudgment. But good players are lucky. Dmitry put himself in a position to succeed. I think the decision to trade queens was, from a practical standpoint, very challenging for White. Aram would have had to find these very slow moves to keep the pressure, and that's no easy matter. I don't think Dimitri's taking this with the bishop. Something tells me
he's just
not
playing
that.
rook G2, and then you're threatening mate in 3 with
and then it's
rook
GG.
E1, and I guess you're
rook
not
GG2
actually
GG.
mating. It's really weird.
Oh,
but
because of
yeah,
rook D1?
D1. Yeah, rook D1, bishop D2, king F1, right? And it's like, okay, great. I might win that game, but it's not me. It's not me.
No, but it's not made, but you can force a pawn endgame.
Exactly.
If you want. So, for example, bishop D2, bishop G5 at the end forces the bishop trade. But you could also, worst comes to worst, you can play rook B1, trade a pair, and then take on C5, and you're up, what, 3 pawns?
Yeah, and so. White's got absolutely nothing going on. So I don't know, Dania. I have this one as, unfortunately, the dust has settled, and it just looks like White's completely lost, and Andreikin should jump out to a 1.5 lead here.
He absolutely will. A big win and a devastating loss. Aram Hakobian with his back against the wall. Let's switch to Kamsky's game against Fedoseev. Kamsky with the white pieces in that Caro-Kann. And that Caro-Kann seems to have gone very, very wrong for Gata.
Yeah, I wonder how, the main question for me is how that queen ended up there.
Wait, what I don't get is why Gata took on E5 just now. Aman, isn't that go against
F5?
F5, there's bishop F6 traps the queen, but you had other options here, I think. Or did you? Maybe queen E7, queen D6.
Wow. Yeah, queen E7 is an idea for sure. A weird one, but maybe necessary.
Or maybe there was something else there. Maybe bishop takes H5 even. In any case, he trades on E5, and from a positional standpoint, just look at the control that Black is going to have over the dark squares, over the center. White's bishop just looked incredibly lame.
Is there something quite annoying here? Like, of course, let's say bishop takes E5, and I might play king G2, but is that pawn going to get to B3? Like, is that the annoying thing? Because if White gets to play B3, then I'm like, okay, I might be like a little worse, but I'm going to find a way here. But if Black plays B3, I just have this terrible sinking feeling that there's going to be too much play on either side of the board, and it's Black can pick and choose.
Well, the other problem, speaking of picking and choosing, White's queen is not out of the woods after Fedoseev's last move, king G7. That threatens bishop F6. And you have this crazy idea, which looks incredibly slow. It's to play F6, rook H8, and G5. Now you might say, no problem, White can push G4 and open up a pathway for the queen. But the medicine might be worse than the disease there, because opening up the king like that with Black's pieces so uniquely positioned to take advantage of that could just be disastrous.
Yep, exactly.
No, this is bad.
This is a problem. This is a problem.
This is highly problematic position in the F6 played by Fedoseev, yes. Man, this is the kind of position you expect Gata to have with Black.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I would never think that Gata would be White in this position.
And, whoever is a fan of the bishop pair really doesn't have much of a platform here.
Nope. Yeah, the bishop pair Twitter account has been suspended.
For sure, yeah.
This is pathetic. Pathetic bishop pair, and no prospect, like literally 0 squares on the king side available for the bishop.
So what, G4? Are we playing G4? What do you think?
I think you have to.
I feel like I'd rather do it now than later, right? Like, I'd rather get it out of the way.
Yeah, you might as well do it before the rook lands on h8, because then h takes
Yeah.
g4 would make matters perhaps even worse.
Mm-hmm.
So what exactly happens after g4? How bad is this?
Right.
Is there bishop f4 maybe?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like this is such a nasty move.
It really is.
Ugh.
Because bishop e1, super uncomfortable. Like, you want to live in a world where you keep the bishop on the board, but I'm not sure that that world is habitable.
And even if black plays, I'm on g5, and like even if you get this position, I'm still not convinced that this is like anywhere near a draw. I feel like black has so many infiltration squares along the dark squares that Fedoseev is going to grind this one out too. g4 is on the board.
Okay, makes sense. There is something I will say about the move b3 for black. I just like to have that. I'd like to have that extra avenue into the position if you're black, because while I agree with you about that last position, maybe being playable, I feel like b3 here is white's best try. It's not the greatest, but you gotta try.
But not here. Not in this specific position, because then bishop takes d2 and queen g3.
Yeah, great point. Great point. And h4
You
is actually a little bit devilish for that exact reason. You can't even take it either. So, tricky.
This bishop is radioactive on f4. It can't be captured, but it can't be not captured either. And got it
So
hanging
you
by
do-
a single thread.
You win the exchange here, or not quite? It's
I think there's rook
thread,
f4 in
yeah.
that position.
Yeah, speaking of a thread.
Just one.
Wow.
Maybe it's time for your
Yeah.
move.
Yeah, it's something about b3. Like, if white gets to play it, I feel like there are positions where we could maybe try to hold. But the nice thing for black is you've kept the pawn on g6 in this line, Danya. That means f5 is always available, and you can break something open favorably. So if you get up material here as black, surely you're winning the game.
Yeah, so even a case might be made for the plan of just trading bishops and doubling rooks on the f file and pushing
Yeah.
f5, closing your eyes and
Seriously.
just, boom goes the dynamite.
Seriously, yep.
I mean, but Fedoseev is going to try to squeeze, I think, more out of the position than that. The move you do not want to play here is g5. I think a lot of people, Aman, would be tempted to make that move. Oh, let's cement the bishop. But
Right.
it's important for black to hold as many, to keep all of the trump cards, to keep as many possible plans as possible, and to keep white guessing as to where he's going to strike next.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. It's not necessary either. The bishop is defended.
By the way, Dmitry Andreikin has officially checkmated his opponent in style, with rook takes a rook f2 check being the final move in the game. Just
Indeed.
he's just a demon. This Andreikin guy, he is a force to be reckoned with. He's up 1.5 half, and
Yep.
Aram Hakobian will have to produce that point in the next two games. We also have the Adams Navara game, which is near its conclusion. Again,
Wow,
I think
super
another
interesting.
game. It should be a draw, but it's a pretty sharp endgame.
Yeah, should be a draw. Like, basically that h5 pawn is dead, right? It's not going to become a queen. It will always be taken by one of black's pieces, but it's the perfect decoy. And if you imagine that a pawn moving up the board and how black's knight can actually stop it, well, d5, c6 unavailable, so the knight probably has to go to c8 and cover on a7. But then if you just visualize this diagonal path, king f3, king e4, king d5, king c6, right? You get all the way up to b7, and the question is, can that knight sacrifice itself for the pawn?
Right down Main Street goes white's king, and there he goes, king f3. He starts with, which shouldn't really matter. I think he's going to play a6 at some point. And what Adams might be going for here is this trick. After king g5, if you go through g5 and f6, I think you lose to knight d5 check. So maybe he's halfway hoping for that. Of course, Navara could take the alternate. You could take LaGuardia instead of JFK and go through f7.
And what
Which I
happens
think-
in terms of the tempi there? king e4, king f7, a6.
Oh, here black loses as well. Knight c8, king d5.
Mm-hmm.
And you called it, on white makes it to b7 in time and
Right.
dislodges the knight through b6.
Exactly.
Wow.
So I feel
Look
like
at this
there
position.
needs
The
to be
knight
some.
stops e-pawn.
Oh wow, yeah, that's beautiful. And king d7.
Sorry, go on.
I was gonna say king d7. It's like you just maybe pick up the pawn first with check, and then go right back where you came from.
No, black is totally paralyzed here, and David is under a minute. I think he's barking up that exact same tree that we just barked up.
Mm-hmm.
And there he goes, king g6.
Now,
So
I think there's
king
something to be
e4,
said about the knight being on c8 being like something you want to just avoid. Once you realize knight c8, king b7, you're like, that doesn't feel right. Is there like a d5
but how do you avoid
move?
it? Here?
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good
king
point.
e4
Yeah, I was
is on
trying
the
to play
board.
d5, but this is a little uncomfortable.
So we know that king f7 loses, and Navara finds the move. Oh! I think after king d5, might it be the case... Wait, what is black's move after king d5?
Take care of your
How
own
does-
pawn, king f5.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking at first. But here I feel like white's much, much faster, because remember that white's knight could always drop down to c2 at the last possible second to stop the e-pawn.
Yeah, good point. And we should point out the worst is... No, I think that I was going to say the worst part of this whole position for black is the pawn on d6. Because if you take that off the board, at least when the king gets to b7, the pawn can give a square for the knight d6. So maybe it's knight a7. Like, please take my pawn.
Right. Please take my pawn, and now pushing the other pawn. Okay, now let's say, yeah, no, you're absolutely right, because after king c7. Basically, you get a situation where, no, never mind. It's not e3. No, this is so hard.
This is crazy.
But okay, let's watch the game. Adams plays a6.
Mm-hmm.
And now, God, knight b6.
I was going to say, what's the time? 30 seconds for 30 seconds. Navara here. I mean, we've been here for minutes, and we've got it wrong 5 times.
Yeah, and how tempting is it just to play king f7 instinctually? 20 seconds now on the clock. I feel like David, though, he's at his best in these situations. No, I jinxed him.
Come on, Daniel.
Adams is going to win.
I was going to say,
this was David's
so
idea. Oh, this is an incredible endgame. And now I think king c6 resists the temptation to take the pawn, because that allows black's king to step into the pathway of white's king. King c6 is the winning move. Holy smokes.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be king c6, king e6, king b7, king d7, knight d5. That's the nasty move.
I think you made an amazing point that the pawn on d6 is actually literally what loses black the game. If it's gone
take
after
it off
king
the board
d7,
and black's fine.
And that's a famous situation, right, where the knight can contain a pawn on a6, but as long as it has access to the d6 square. And I think Adams is just confirming. It's like, is this really
he has
winning?
the time to. I mean, look, there's not many moves left in this game before a potential result. So take your time here. He's got 2 minutes. No need to rush. There are limited.
Oh, you know what else?
Limited choices.
You know what else black could try? After king c6, you could just try to go d5 there.
For sure.
To open up the d6 square. Nor can Mickey take too long here. He's down on minute 45. You want to leave yourself with a couple of seconds to react to your opponent's move.
Wow, such a complicated position.
Also, I have some crazy news for you, but we'll state Fedoseev drew. He just offered a draw in that position.
Okay, but we have to stay here. This is
Oh yeah, no,
a crazy ending.
Sure.
But that's wild. Oh my goodness, what a round.
We'll update you on the final position of that game after this game finishes. There's d5 by David. Knight takes d5, stopping the e-pawn. Oh, knight e7 check.
E6.
King e6 played. God, can you go king c7 here?
Ridiculous,
oh my God. Knight d6. There's all these forks and checks. It's
Oh,
impossible
goodness.
to calculate this.
Yeah, so
Seatbelts
I
fastened
think
and
after-
mandatory.
After king c7, what white wants to do is king c7, knight d6, knight c3. We want to cover the b5 square and then go a7.
He went to e3 though, so the b5 square is now accessible to black, and I think David's going to pull out the draw.
I think it's a huge mistake.
Yeah, now knight b5. The knight had to be on c3. You're absolutely correct. Oh, Adams let it slip.
Like, the only way to try for white is to look at the squares black needs. c8, d6, b5. If you can't control those 3 squares, or at least one of them rather, you're not winning the game, because the knight is going to sack for the pawn, as we know, this dance. And that's why I think, credit to David, whether it worked or not, he knew he had to play d5. That was a great move. Sack that pawn, get it out of there, and now I think king f4, and this is just a draw.
He is such a resilient defender. He will uncork every last chance. And now he's just going to push e3 and let his knight do the rest. And I'll show that key moment after this game finishes. Let's make sure that nothing else of a crazy variety happens in this game.
Things can still,
such as a
still
flag.
happen.
Knight a7,
Good
only
point.
move, by the way. 10 seconds for Mickey. And that's it. Yep. Knight c8 and king b7, knight d6. Trying to go for a pre-move. Yeah. Draw.
Wow.
Oh, what a heartbreaker for Adams. And the key moment, Aman, you
smile
called it.
from Navara at the end. As do you think he probably saw what could have gone wrong?
Well, knight c3 was game over. Knight c3, e3,
Yep.
king c7, knight a7, king b7. Oh, and look at this. You might say, oh, wait, I have knight b5 and e2, but the knight drops back to d4 with a fork.
Amazing.
Oh,
And there's
what a-
nothing
what
that black could have
beautiful
done
tactics.
differently. So
No,
much.
because the king is just pegged. It's pegged to e6. Unbelievable.
Yeah, it has to. I mean, this was an unbelievable endgame, and it ended up as a draw, which just goes to show, goes to show how difficult it was, even for two of the absolute best. And Dania, as we wrap up this round, you had some news for me. What the heck happened in that other match?
Well, it almost seemed, and you called it, Fedoseev did a couple of things. He allowed the trade of dark square, or he traded dark squared bishops. He got the knight versus bishop position. Then he allowed b3. And it just seems to me that Vladimir wasn't all that ambitious in this position. He didn't want to take any undue risks. My inclination to here would be to slowly prepare f5. I mean, you can always veer off the freeway. You could always say, okay, I'm not feeling it. Let me take the drop. But for whatever reason, Fedoseev, maybe the clock situation, he wasn't feeling it, and he takes the draw.
We can see the scores from round 2 or game 2 rather, in all these matchups. And wow, I gotta go out on a limb here and be critical. I think that's a very strange decision from Fedoseev. He's up in the first, after the first game, he's ahead, gets that very, very nice win. I think you could nearly put away this match with a victory here. So he might go on to regret that. If you're Kamsky, you're breathing a big sigh of relief that you get out of 2 games with a half point, quite honestly.
No, if you're Gata, you get another chance with the black pieces for sure, but he's going to do his best. And the other matches are still wide open. Aram Hakobian has his work cut out for him. And we will have our work cut out for us as we watch the remainder of these matches. But first, ladies and gentlemen, a short break here at the Chess.com Global Championship. We'll be back with the third match game of these Day 2 knockouts on the other side of this short break.
Your subscription makes shows like this possible, which is why our Twitch subscribers will never see ads on chess.com. Connect your chess.com account and Twitch account at go.chess.com/connectaccounts, and bang, boom, voila, you're done. 100% ad-free bliss forevermore. Whether you're following our events on site or on stream, type the command connect in the chat, and thank you for helping bring these shows to life. Open to anyone, all around the world. The Chess.com Global Championship offers the dream of playing against the best. And hey, have we mentioned there's also $1 million at stake?
The total pot is $1 million.
No, that is not a typo. The prizes are unbelievably generous.
We began with thousands of players. Now only dozens remain.
There it is.
Oh my God!
Wow.
Eric Hansen!
This is crazy.
Eric Hansen moves on to the round of 32 in Armageddon fashion.
The CGC knockout phase has arrived. There are those who played their way in, and some are here thanks to their well-earned reputations. No matter who you are, things are about to get very, very real.
What did he just put her to do? What?
A trip to the CGC finals and a clean shot at the largest first place prize of the year. My friends, it's the CGC round of 64. Who will take the next step to Toronto?
And there we had it, the beautiful Toronto skyline, the dulcet tones of Danny Wrench and the CGC Global Championship here alongside Grandmaster Amon Hamilton, bringing you coverage of the round of 64. We're 2 games into today's knockout matches. Amon, we've had all of the action we could possibly ask for as we review the standings. Anything crazy jumping out at you, or things moving along as kind of as you expected?
Well, honestly, a little bit of both, if I can answer that way, because I feel like the way we've gotten here is so unexpected. I mean, Fedoseev could be easily up 2-0 right now in the match. There should have probably been a result in the previous game between Navara and Adams. Andreikin came away with a win from maybe a game where he was on the worst end. So I feel like we've got the favorites leading, Fedoseev, Andreikin, but the way they got there is not necessarily expected. So I'm both surprised, but also I feel like we are where a lot of people expected. And Danya, we got Andreikin and Fedoseev, the two favorites that are ahead right now, 1.5 to half.
They are ahead, and should they cement their leads and finish off their matches successfully, then they will face off in the next stage, and that is going to be an epic matchup. They have played quite a bit in the RCC. They've played a lot over the board, and I'm pretty sure that Dmitry Andreikin has the better score. But Vladimir Fedoseev, when he's on fire, he can explode. He can defeat anybody, and he's one of those dark horses who's, below 2,700 FIDE, but guess what? He makes it into the final 8 in Toronto. Nobody's going to want to face him.
Yeah, absolutely. That's someone that he'll be the underdog on paper, but one of the scariest underdogs you'll ever face, I think, as we have Andreikin's game looks like has just begun, and curious to see what system he goes with the white pieces. We saw a very tame setup last time, and I feel like once again he's gone for an opening that I would say is more for rapid chess thing.
Yeah, the quali system. Although I did dabble with it in the last US Championship, and I feel like it's better than its reputation. It's been overshadowed by this other opening that shall not be named that's kind of structurally similar. I don't want to, we're not allowed to cuss on, during the commentary. So
got to keep it family friendly.
The L word is, exactly. But I honestly think that this system, it's never been refuted. It's incredibly solid. And, it's definitely similar to the London in that you get these pawns on E3 and D4. You get the clamp on the center, and you get this classic idea, Aman, and you're much more of a specialist than me, but I know that knight E5 and F4 is pretty standard fare in a lot of these positions, as well as C4.
Yep. And a lot of times in these ones, white's interested in playing knight E5, F4, and even the move C5 by black can sometimes be met by DC5, opening up the bishop from B2. So I think white's interested in, playing in the center here. If you go for a C4, then, sometimes black even reacts with C5, and you just get this mass simplification in the center where one side might end up with what we call hanging pawns. 2 pawns in the center where one side can put pressure on them, treat them like weaknesses, and the other side will have much more active play available.
And I can show that an example of hanging pawns would be, let's say, black plays C5, white plays C4, which very well might happen. Let me make a semi-random move. And then if white orchestrates both of these trades, you have these pawns, which are themselves isolated. They're like one big pawn island. And they're neither good nor bad, Aman. I mean, it's just one of the most complicated pawn structures in general in chess. Very, very hard to handle accurately.
These are pawns that white targets and tries to treat like weaknesses, but it looks like after black played C5, white's going to go for what I would call kind of a more classical approach in this Zukertort kind of setup where you don't touch the C pawn at all, and instead you're going knight E5, pawn to F4, and you're supporting the knight like that while leaving the knight on D2 to cover the E4 square.
And I assume the rook lift is also a pretty standard fare once you play F4 in many of these positions.
Yeah, and rook lift coupled with G4, G5, and the queen beautifully goes to H5 after the knight on F6 gets kicked by the G pawn, and it's just a very flowy kind of attack. Yeah,
you get, of course, a lot of these same ideas in the London, and these bishops on B2 and D3, they're kind of the unsung heroes of white's position, supporting everything from behind, and they can jump into the action at the drop of a hat. You could get sacks on H7. After DC, you could get the bishop on B2, sniping at black's king. So do not be deceived by the fact that at the present moment, the bishops might not look like anything special. They can be a devastating force.
They certainly can. I also look at the move F5. Good, just attacking move to have in your arsenal there. Opening up the F file, pressure on the F7 pawn. And rook d1 is, I think, just a nice move, getting the final piece into the action. If black plays knight e4, a lot of the times, suddenly there's going to be an open d file that pieces might just disappear. I know it looks all clogged up right now, Danya, but it can really quickly open up. So the d file is a great place for the white rook.
It feels to me that black is already worse. Do you share that sentiment?
I do. I'll be the first to admit my bias. I just love these positions where white gets f4 to support the knight, and it's unclear how black dislodges it. If everyone wants to play f6, but to do so, you've got to move your knight. Knight e8, not particularly attractive because how quickly will white set up rook f3, rook h3?
And I can show an example of such a sacrifice. Rook f3. If black plays f6, that almost always runs into whoop, check, and you can just close your eyes and make these. These moves are so automatic. How many games, how many thousands of games have been won at all levels with this kind of attack?
Yeah, so true. This would be too much to handle, and pretty good start, I want to say, for Andreikin, who's ahead in the match.
A great position for Andreikin. If he wins this game, he wins the entire match. They will not play the fourth game. And same with Vladimir Fedoseev, who's got the white pieces, and he's got to try to be ambitious, right? You don't want this coming down to the wire to the last game, especially since Gata will have white in the last game. Let's see what Vladimir comes up with in the opening here.
Yeah, and this may be sort of play something that he thought about previously. Do you think it sort of plays into his decision to take that draw? He thought, okay, I'll have the white pieces next, a win, I can put away this match. Maybe he's just feeling confident with his chances based on how the first game with the white pieces went.
Entirely possible, knowing Vladimir's overall success with the white pieces. And yet, despite Gata Kamsky's normal play, 30-second think here on move 4. Now, there's, I would say, two categories of systems. Amon, there's systems where you play c4, and then there's more King's Indian-oriented approaches where you prepare e4. Let's see which one Vladimir plays. c4, I think, is more common these days.
Yeah, and although a natural move, h6, oftentimes that h6 move can look a little sloppy. I'm going to say that in this particular case, I think it's really comfortable for black. Like, you basically have a reversed London, and black hasn't spent time to play e6. A lot of times black plays e6, and then this happens, and maybe you need to play e5. But here, black has the option to play knight bd7, and maybe next move play e5. Plus, you've got h6 in. So I feel like Gata, in his wealth of London knowledge, even flipping the board and playing it systematically from the black pieces, I feel like he can be reasonably happy with this opening.
I have lost so many of these equal endgames to Gata where he just starts squeezing you, and every piece moves to the right square. And just when you think he can't improve his position any further, he maneuvers his knight to an even better square. And so, from that perspective, could a case be made that Vladimir should do something a little bit more drastic here? Maybe just an early b-pawn push to b5? What do you make of that?
Wow. Yeah, that's
too crazy.
That's the type of I don't think anything's too crazy in these kind of positions, because I think white has some liberties that they can take here. Bishop on g2 is so strong when you take away that c6 pawn. So b4, b5, just as a simple plan, is honestly pretty attractive looking. b4, e5, and then just b5.
e5.
Open up that
knowing
bishop,
Vladimir
so.
for knowing him for many years, I feel like his eyes are on the b pawn. I can just tell that he's thinking about it, but he's not going to play it, or maybe he'll play it on the next move.
True,
but probably not. But now, if you play b4, you run into e5.
Yep, that's a good point. And c2 isn't available. Let's not make the mistake that I've seen not just lower-rated players make, Dania, but GMs and myself included, forgetting about that bishop.
I'm defending the pawn.
Yeah, exactly. No, that long-range piece is easy to forget about, tucked away on h7. But if you're not going for b4 at this point, so why play the move knight d4, I wonder?
Well, I've seen the knight migrate over to b3 in these types of positions, and then perhaps even to a5 in order to put potentially significant pressure on these pawns, because if the knight lands on a5, rook b8, it might walk into bishop f4, or even bishop b3. And I feel like they had this in the first game. I feel like they had the same type of structure with Gata's pawn eventually landing on a6. Maybe even the
That's
same
right.
opening. I'm not totally sure.
Yeah, could very well have been a slightly different line, but similar structure for sure. And, obviously, Fedoseev, he didn't just like his position, he liked how the game was flowing, maybe the time spent. So he probably wants something similar again, where he just doesn't feel like he's risking anything.
But he's already dug himself into quite a significant time deficit. And, there's still zero sort of definition in the position, and that could be pretty concerning. Vladimir has excellent time management. He almost never gets into acute time pressure. But when you're playing Gata in a slow, long maneuvering game like this, Aman, every second is golden.
Yeah, absolutely.
Knight A3.
Knight A3,
Classic
really
Fedoseev.
interesting. Yeah, really interesting move for me. I'll say E5. Certainly jumping out to me as first consideration.
So let's say I go Knight B3.
And
Are
I guess
we
what
taking on A3?
my feelings, no. I'm pretty firmly against that, for better or for worse. I will say Knight A5 that you kind of mentioned earlier is a really annoying way to put pressure on those two pawns. But one way that kind of deals with it is like long castling. So bishop E7, Knight A5,
So
long castle, or long castle right away. That kind of idea. Then the knight on A5, I'm not sure how great it is. Bishop B4 might kick it. King C7 is going to be pretty well placed, and Black might want to just say, okay, Rook HE8. Show me what I'm missing.
Yeah, and once the knight moves away from D7, White could start experiencing major problems in, the coordination of his pieces. White might not be fully equipped to deal with the tension down the D file. So it's exactly the kind of Gata has everything he could possibly ask for out of the open. He's got his type of position.
Agreed.
Virtually all of the pieces are still on the board other than the queen, and he's got a 4-minute time advantage. So I'm jumping the gun here a little bit, but we're only 10 moves in, but I think this is a big, big opportunity that Gata needs to try to capitalize on.
Agreed. Yeah, I think this is a good chance for him. He's not going to get over optimistic or anything, but hey, opponent is under 10 minutes already, clearly not comfortable with this position. And, Gata, like I said, is leading expert on the London. And we just see this move A5, sort of crack the whip sort of move. He's not allowing the knight to get there. He's going to play maybe pawn to A4. I just going to, you said you might be jumping the gun. I'm going to get on board with you and say, love the opening from Gata. And I think he's playing it super, super well.
He's got his Phillips screwdriver kit out. And look at this line, Aman, before we go to the Michael Adams game. If Vladimir would have taken and gone back to B1, Bishop C2 wins the game.
That's hilarious.
Isn't that cute? In any case, Gata, he's tightening the screws. He's got a good position. We'll keep an eye on his attempts to level the score in this third game. The other one we haven't looked at yet, Navara Adams. More trades.
Wow.
Potentially another draw.
Really, really interesting position, though, with F5 already played. I'm curious, how did we get here exactly?
How did we get here? We got here through an Italian. It was pretty normal for a while. H3, A5, Knight BD2, A4. That's the fashionable pawn advance that we see. Hikaru playing a lot. Knight F1, Knight E7. So we have a trade of light-scored bishops, which, Aman, we don't see every day. The light-scored bishops get traded in the Italian in this particular version that often.
Right.
Nor do we see Black playing F5 in the Italian.
Yeah, I found this to be pretty interesting, but you're right that it does look like a lot of trade. Like if you put knight takes E5 on the board, pawn takes, queen takes on D8, knight takes on F5, and you can just imagine, as Yasser and I like to say, the cleaning lady brings out the vacuum and just starts. It's possible that everything just disappears. So
now, speaking of everything disappearing, I have a feeling, or maybe that feeling is wrong, but I want to switch to the Andreikin game real fast because I had a feeling that Andreikin was about to win. but I wasn't looking at it carefully. Now that I am looking at it carefully, I still feel like Andreikin's about to win.
And upon further investigation, love this. I would, I was gonna say, I would point out that that knight is not really hanging, Danya. Knight h6, checkmate. Thank you very much.
Oh, come on. And b4, I think, ends the game, because if the knight moves away, whoop, knight takes c6,
Was the
smashes
last move
through the
F6?
gates. No, the last move was de. So Andreikin had
it's a weird,
induced
weird
F6.
thing about these Zucker positions is that white, like, you always think when you're attacking, or when you're being attacked, that the thing to get rid of is that light squared bishop. We're like conditioned. If that piece is not there, we're safe. But the Zucker has this weird way of white often giving up the light squared bishop because it's not part of the attack. Black's gone g6. Light squared bishop's not doing anything. Instead, black's light squared bishop is now blocked by their own pawn, and it's the remaining pieces which secure the victory.
That's a great way to put it. And Andreikin choosing a very business-like approach as he simply eliminates the knight on c5. And I think the point is that after fg, there's a relatively simple combination. Knight h6, bishop d4, forcing the king onto h6, and queen g4 with queen h3 mate, essentially on unstoppable, as they say in French. Oh,
right. Yeah, and
Pretty
bishop
sure it's not a word, but
F6 runs into pawn takes on g5 or bishop f6. Yeah.
I wonder what white should do here. What do you think? How
Not
get
queen
a position?
g5.
Right. A move that starts with F and ends with takes g5 check. If it walks like a fork, talks like a fork, et cetera, et cetera. I think Arama's going to resign here.
He's unfortunately, Danya, I'm no expert on reading body language, but I feel like his head has been in his hands, not in a good way, for too much of this match.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems like, he was off to a great start. Let's not forget that. Drawing the first one with black, advantage with white in the second game, but at the drop of a hat, like the entire momentum shifted with that one move I'm on. That hasty bishop takes f6. That's what killed him.
Yep. Yeah, it's amazing. One decision, one move can have such a big impact on the game, but that's chess, quite unforgiving.
Dmitry always has that pose, like he's telling a room full of kids to be quiet. Be quiet, I'm finishing off another 2600 GM in 18 moves.
Yeah, pipe down, everyone. Yeah, I feel like he's speaking to me. I'm going to be quiet now.
No, he's a monster. And I've never struggled as much in the opening against someone as I struggle against Dmitry with the black pieces. The guy puts so much pressure from the very first moves in any opening I'm on. It's absolutely uncanny the way he does it.
Yeah, and he has this slow kind of boa constrictor style that you don't feel like that's what he's doing, but every move that goes by, you're like, hey, you start to doubt yourself, start to believe him, and hey, the guy's usually right as well.
And then before you know it, it's like +6. You get a position like this, and you can resign.
Yeah.
All of the pieces are on the right squares.
I think you called the line bishop d4, and I don't think you play knight h6 without the intention of playing bishop to d4. So
yeah, there it is. Okay, bishop f6 maybe is nominally more resilient,
for sure,
but perhaps black would like to die a more painless death with king takes h6.
Yeah,
because you're going to die either way.
You're not going far.
How do you think white
bishop
should
takes
finish it up here?
Yeah, I bishop takes and pawn takes g5 maybe.
I guess I'll take on f1 and play rook f8. Whoops, no.
Yeah,
but even
and
takes
honestly, I'm boring enough to just take and check and queen in. Yeah.
Yeah, this is the Hambleton school. Queen f2, queen f6.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Appropriate sound effects.
No way I'm not winning this.
Yeah. And Aram might resign here. He might play a couple more moves.
And that will actually
the game is over, the match is over.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. That's a good point. So we won't even see game 4 here, as it looks like Andreikin, who was, not only a favorite in this match, but a favorite in the group, will pretty handily move forward.
Now, by the way, we also called the proceedings in the Navara Adams game. They do have what seems to be a rather insipid endgame, but upon closer examination, it strikes me that Navara has dug himself into a pretty serious hole here.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps even a decisive hole. Oh my gosh, look at this.
And so, yeah, rook e2, clearly wrong energy because rook d1, and just nobody's happy there. So bishop e3.
But now you're taking the rook
strangely,
d2, and I think Navara might have forgotten about that.
Yeah. I mean, you're losing. So you can't, you shouldn't really allow rook f takes f2. That looks like a no-go.
Well, what else looks like a no-go is rook takes b2. The entire queen side just...
What, f3 is necessary?
Well, we're about to find out because this is on the board.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm surprised it's only plus 3.
Yeah, f3. Okay, b2 falls. Black's got rook g5 to really open the second rank as well, like to force g4 maybe after f3.
Oh man, David is... You can see he's dejected.
But it's...
No, can't blame him either. He plays f3. I think that was really the only move.
Agreed. You have to play for f3. The pawn falls. I just don't see him survive because the pawns can just advance. White's rook. You never want to be passive in a rook endgame. So rook on a1, you'd love to go like rook d1, rook down to maybe the 7th rank or something. But black is really quick taking on a2 and pushing that pawn.
This is going to be, if Mickey Adams can finish converting this is going to be such a vintage win. The modern player that I would compare Mickey's style to is Wesley So. I've had probably 3 or 4 over the board games against Wesley where, look, it's equal, all the pieces are getting traded, you blink, and then you're just completely lost in some endgame. And Adams is just a magician in that way. The way he puts pressure using the most economical of forces with like 1 or 2 pieces is incredible.
Yep. And I'm a big fan of the move b5 because I think it defends the pawn, it covers c4. Black can even play c6 next, just connect everything. The a pawn is a sitting duck, and let's say white isn't able to make any progress himself. Black's going to play king g8, king f7, king e6, and just improve everything.
The bamboo stick here is going to be handed to white. I mean, I don't see a single source of counterplay.
No, this looks really brutal. And
well, Aman,
counterplay
this reminds me of that time that I had a rook endgame against Adams in the Lost Boys Open in 1989.
No, this is a disaster. A3, I think, is the only move to at least try to free up the rook. Can you even hypothetically imagine a scenario where white generates some form of counterplay?
I want to be able to answer that affirmatively.
Stony silence.
Yeah, I really want to be able to give you an answer here, but look, a3, rook b3 looks, very logical. The one thing rook b3
C4
does, is it gives up the second rank, and I think that was kind of a key thing that I enjoyed how the move rook g5 would maybe force g4 or a rook trade.
So perhaps
what about rook g5?
Your rook g5 induce g4, and then wheel the rook around, maybe around to like d2.
Yeah, I was thinking something like
sacrificing e5 along the way, because who cares about that pawn?
Right. I just get a good feeling about the 2 rooks down there should handle business.
Yeah, this This is very, very nasty. And Adams has played rook g5. By the way, we have a result. Oh, and Dmitry Andreikin, he doesn't just win, he wins in style. Look at this final combination, Amon.
Oh my God.
Rook f8, rook d7, queen a1.
Oh my goodness, that is
beautiful.
That is amazing. Wow, the vision, the cross-board vision, a1 all the way to the g7 square. And look, every piece that White has is working, and there's nothing Black can do about it. That's a gorgeous checkmating pattern. He had a few in this game. The knight and bishop one earlier to even set up this possibility, and then queen on a1, knight on h6 to finish it off.
What a gorgeous mating construction, and that is how Dmitry Andreikin makes his way into the round of 32, ladies and gentlemen, as he dispatches Aram Hakobian, and so we have 3 matches still in play. Let's maybe quickly check into the Fedoseev Kamsky game, because Vladimir has his back against the wall, kind of as we predicted.
Yeah, I didn't see this going any other way, especially, if bishop takes b4 would ever happen, and it has, then that a2 pawn, look, sitting duck. You got White's most powerful pieces on the board guarding an a2 pawn.
Also, look at the clock, Amon. Can you believe that? I mean, I've seen Fedoseev up 7 minutes. I don't think I've ever seen him down 7 minutes on the clock. 8 minutes.
Yeah, it's amazing, really. Like, such a one-sided game. I mean, f4.
Look at this position. Sag.
Yeah, he doesn't even need to bother calculating. The e2 pawn is stuck on that very square. Knight d3 would be game over. And, I mean, it's just take your pick of what you want to do with Black here.
You know those little kind of documents that the scientists put into space in case aliens find it? They wanted to, in universal terms, convey the meaning of certain terms. If we needed to universally convey the meaning of positional domination or skilled chess player, you would just show this position. Hopelessness. Yeah, you just show this position.
Yeah.
Despair. You would highlight the bishop on f1.
No, it's really rough. Yeah, bishop on f1 is back on its starting square and ironically has less prospects than when the game started.
Yeah, great way to put it. And why don't we finish setting up the pieces with knight b1?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's the rook on b2 is misplaced. It should be on h1.
No, I think Vladimir will resign.
Which is going to level up this match and hand the white pieces over to Gata, going into that crucial game number 4. So what an amazing comeback, considering I thought that Vladimir could have been 2-0 easily. He took that draw. I was critical of that. Now it's like, you must be in full regret mode.
Oh, totally. No, now he's going to be thinking, why didn't I, go for it? Why didn't I take the gamble? Yeah. And, that choice to play the King's Indian attack and allow that endgame, went right into Gata's wheelhouse. And Gata still needs to put a couple finishing touches, but I have zero doubts that he will. I mean, it's literally Zugzwang. Look at this position. I mean, this is amazing. H5, are you kidding me? He wants to take and then send his rook around through the H file.
It's at this moment where I really mean this. I think Black can play King d6, King c5, Knight away, King d4, King e3. Like, I really mean that. That's how good the position is.
The red carpet. It's unraveled, literally.
Roll it out.
Well.
Bishop on f1. Like, are you there?
You don't have to know any rules of chess to know that White has lost here. You don't even need to know what the pieces are. It's just inherently clear from the way that where they're located.
Yeah.
And I guess in White's case, where they're not located. God, he just continues nailing the coffin. It's like, you've nailed it shut. No, I want another nail. Another nail. He's going to play b6. He's just...
Oh, knight e4. Have I ever been happier to take a piece?
I know. Oh my gosh. And I would send the king around to h5.
For
Mon
sure.
Hambleton's school of technique.
Love that. Yeah.
Oh, rook d6. Okay, he's got a fork.
Yeah, a fork will do it. you know, those
But
are the
do
forks
you
where
want to
you're like,
get rid of this knight?
yeah, you're like, man, it's winning, but I hate that it's winning. I hate that I need to play it, you know?
No, you want to enjoy as much as possible the pieces, but okay, he's all business.
Yeah.
Okay, this is over. Let's see how Mr. Adams is doing in his attempt at conversion.
Mm-hmm.
He's doing quite swimmingly. This game is also over.
It's funny because it looks like White is in a better spot than before because, you know, he's he's like got all these pawns. He's actually up a pawn, believe it or not, but you know, it couldn't be further from the truth as, you know, the pawn is going to reach a2 with rook b1 coming, and they're just not saving it.
And I think the problem is going to be the idea we talked about earlier, which is rook d6, rook d2, and then you're going to basically use this construction to exchange one pair of rooks, shifting the other to b1 and paving the way for promotion. It's all over.
Yeah, and how painful, right, is a position like this, because you actually need both of your rooks on the first rank to stop the pawn because of rook b1.
It's such a
Reduced
clear
to full
illustration of
passivity.
the power of piece activity, right? Who even cares about the pawn count? White could be up 3 pawns here. Wouldn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
You could take away h6 and
point.
g7. White black would still be winning. Completely winning, actually.
Yeah. It's a really bad spot to be in. Rook a1. Basically bringing the rook back to e1 in effect, but allowing his opponent a chance to play rook b1, which probably wouldn't be a great move.
Yeah, probably not. What about rook takes c3?
Yeah,
rook
just
e2, I guess,
quicker
is
way
the idea.
to get down there.
Oh, and now this is winning.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Bring the rook back to e2
or h2.
Yeah, it really goes to show
happening.
like that's precisely why not only you don't want your king cut off on the last rank in rook end games, but also why you don't want your rooks just sitting around in passive squares. It's a great illustration.
Yeah, and Adams with so much time on his clock. That's maybe the most excruciating feeling of all, when you don't even have the tiny glimmer of hope that's given to you by your opponent's time pressure. You know he's just going to sit on it until he's totally sure that this is winning.
Uh-huh.
It's all over.
David
David Navara resigns.
That's one you can resign, exactly.
And simultaneously, as if in synchrony,
this
Vladimir
position
resigns as well.
Both look really, really tough to play. It's kind of understandable. I don't think either player wants to be there.
It was not premature resignation, we can put it that way.
Yeah. No,
wow.
Amazing. We saw a victory from Andreikin, not just in the game, but the match overall, as we look at the standings after game number 3. But what about these other 2 matches, Daniel? One of them's completed, but it's looking like everything to play for in the Kamsky and Fedoseev match.
Absolutely. And of course, David Navara, don't count him out either. He's going to have the black pieces in a must-win situation. We saw Vishy Anand delivering in that situation. We saw Dingley Ren yesterday against Min Lee, and then he managed to win the Armageddon as well. So plenty of chess left to be played. We are going to watch carefully. And Kamsky Fedoseev, it's all tied up. Vladimir has to put that loss behind him and full tilt, full focus with the black pieces. He's got a tough task ahead of him. We've got a short break ahead of us. Don't go anywhere, because the most interesting part of these 2 matches is yet to come. You're watching the Chess.com Global Championship. It's day 2. It's the round of 64. And we will be back with more action in just a couple of minutes.
Hi guys, my name is Nashar, and I love being on camera, and I like for y'all to get to see my handsome face and know what I look like. Originally I'm from the South, Georgia, and I've been here in New York for over 55 years. Well, this park here is most famous and most traditional. The United States champion Bobby Fischer used to play here in the 1960s when he was about 13 years old. Ready? A young man by the name of Harry beat me up so bad I couldn't understand it. So I say, what am I doing wrong, man? Tell me something. You know, so he said, you're not playing chess, you're playing mess.
Open to anyone. all around the world. The Chess.com Global Championship offers the dream of playing against the best. And hey, have we mentioned there's also $1 million at stake?
The total pot is $1 million.
No, that is not a typo. The prizes are unbelievably generous.
We began with thousands of players. Now only dozens remain.
There it is.
Oh my God!
Wow.
Eric Hansen!
This is crazy.
Eric Hansen moves on to the round of 32 in Armageddon fashion.
The CGC knockout phase has arrived. There are those who played their way in, and some are here thanks to their well-earned reputations. No matter who you are, things are about to get very, very real.
What did he just put her tonight? What?
A trip to the CGC finals and a clean shot at the largest first-place prize of the year. My friends, it's the CGC round of 64. Who will take the next step to Toronto?
We welcome you back to the Chess.com Global Championship. We're watching the round of 64, and the stage is set for an amazing finale to this second day of knockout action here with Grandmaster Amon Hamilton, GM Daniel Nerdisky bringing you today's coverage. Now, one match has already concluded as we review the current standings. Dmitry Andreikin has knocked out Aram Hakobian. Amon, the other two matches are wide open, particularly Fedoseev Kamsky, which is all tied up going to the last game.
Yeah, you said it. I think Fedoseev needs to put that loss behind him as best he can. Tilt is going to be no one's best friend, and a short-term memory is an asset. Kamsky, however, riding a lot of momentum, and especially getting that game. I mean, he's going to be full of confidence. He's got the white pieces going into this game number 4. And meanwhile, David Navara is in a must-win situation if he wants to force Armageddon. And not just the match on the line, but the prizes at stake here, Dania, are, I mean, substantial. $5,000 for this match itself. And of course, these guys are playing for $1 million overall.
And like you said, one move could cost you $5,000 because the difference between making it into the round, at least $5,000, if not more than that. So the players know that.
Honestly.
They're already nervous to begin with, but that is some serious money, which is going to be on the line with every move. Now we're going to start with the Kamsky-Fedoseev game. Very important for Vladimir not to get put under pressure in the opening, right? Not to get Gada's type of position, which is exactly what happened last game.
Right, and I wonder, because I'm not sure we caught the beginning of it, but remember, the last time that Kamsky was white, he had a terrible go. He won't want to play that again. That was that Caro-Kann game?
Yeah, so Vladimir actually deviating his opening.
Right.
I guess if it ain't broke, he tries to fix it. It ain't broke, but he's still fixing it.
That's right, yeah.
And
he'll never be out of a job.
And Gada has been playing Bishop e5 check since before Vladimir was born. So already, I like this choice of opening by Gada. He gets a quiet, maneuvering struggle, and I feel like he feels so comfortable in these types of situations.
Absolutely. We saw, I guess was it Mickey Adams who utilized this as well with the white pieces, Bishop b5 check. It's something that doesn't offer a lot of risk, and I think Kamsky's kind of learned from the previous game. He says, look, if I'm not going to win this game, that's one thing. We'll go to an Armageddon. But I certainly don't want to put myself in a position where I'm much worse, 10, 15 moves in and potentially just risking losing. There's no sense to do that when you have the white pieces.
Totally valid, and his time management has been excellent in this match so far. Now, the two main plans in this position are c3 and d4, and the second one, which is more to Gada's liking, is c2, c4, and then you follow that up with d4. Well, the same exact structure that we saw in the Navara-Adams game with queen g4, except, of course, here the queens are on the board, and in contrast to that game, black's got the e6 and d6 pawns rather than d6 and g6.
And I definitely think black could opt for e5. It's not usually the way you want to go about things, but black could play e5 and try to prevent d4. However, the move d4 is not something that you're really scared of. Black's got a6, e6. He's going to follow up with bishop e7 and castle. You almost have this hedgehog kind of structure, which is characterized by a lot of pawns on the 6th rank for black.
Yeah, I mean, black is ridiculously solid in these types of positions. I think Gada's trying to decide whether to play the immediate d4 or whether to make a preparatory move such as b3, which comes to mind, or maybe rook d1 to sort of first position the pieces on good squares and then play d4. But you're right. I mean, black is a little bit cramped, Aman, but it's so incredibly solid. These structures are notoriously hard to crack, even when you quote unquote have all of your pieces on the best squares.
That's right. It's hard to optimize further than that. So I think we're definitely in for a long game. Both players have something pretty serious to lose and gain from this game right here. I don't think either one is going to be looking to take too much risk, but certainly, any error will be pounced on immediately. But I definitely expect a long maneuvering game, Daniel.
And one example of a classic error would be to push d4 prematurely and allow black to play b5 when the knight on c3 is unprotected. So Gada will want to fianchetto his bishop first. But let's catch the start of the Michael Adams-David Navara game, which could be confused for the Kamsky-Fedoseev game, because now we have a Caro-Kann here.
Right. Again, it's two knights. I think not only a very, very good try for white, even in classical chess, but certainly in rapid, a very fashionable choice these days. And I think what we might be getting into is a pretty old variation here with some pretty tried and true tested theory here. G4, knight e5, white immediately threatens the c6 knight. And there's also some ideas with h4 leading towards trapping that bishop on g6.
Yeah, old is right. I think this has been around since the mid-century mark. I remember seeing this when I was a kid. For some reason, it hasn't been popular, as far as I know. And I feel like most people have been taking on f3 here kind of automatically. But this is exactly the kind of thing, Aman, that you would want if you're trying to play for a win. Maybe cook up an old line that's considered bad, but maybe you have an idea there that, perhaps Adams doesn't know. So I'm very intrigued as to what David's going to come up with here.
Yeah, because I'm familiar with, I've definitely seen like rook c8, queen d6, but queen c7 is certainly interesting. Yeah. Briefly, leaving the d pawn hanging. Of course, the knight on e5 was loose, so white protects, and it's like, how do you, refuse the opportunity to play either h4 or bishop f4 with the queen on c7?
And I guess the direct point of putting the queen on c7 is to meet bishop f4. For bringing up an analysis board here with bishop d6. And here it looks like black is safe and sound. So the more tempting move for me is definitely h4. And maybe black wants... What do you think black wants here? What comes to mind?
Well, the usual idea, I guess, in the opening overall is kind of to meet h4 with, as you're highlighting, f6. So that's the first thing that I would think of. Knight takes g6 can be played, but after hg6, the h pawn is certainly a target for black's rook. Sometimes the king can just nestle itself on f7. It's really really sturdy there, guarding g6 and f7, and black has easy development with bishop b4 or d6 and knight g to e7.
Yeah, that's very well explained. And so for that reason, as we go back to the live board, Michael Adams choosing a more flexible move and a very venomous move at that. This sets a hidden trap. You might say, no problem, just going to go bishop d6. But knight takes d5 and black can resign.
Yeah,
tricky little move. And if Navara goes knight f6.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say the reason that you're even thinking of bishop d6 is because, you want to get that setup. Bishop d6, knight e7. You can't get that setup the other way around. So the queen e2 is like getting in black's head. It's like, I know what setup you want. I'm going to play the move that is most annoying for you.
Yeah, and you're not exactly going to castle queenside here. That Looks just a little bit too brazen. And you're right, after 97, sadly, bishop f8 to d6 is not... Even grandmasters are not allowed to do that.
And it seems
to me that
the rest of the pieces.
Yeah. Mickey has gotten David Navara to start thinking. And if Navara doesn't have a move here, then I'm very, very concerned for his chances. Maybe bishop
and what
b4.
about knight f6 that you were highlighting? Like knight f6, sure, another way to develop pieces. You're guarding the d5 pawn there, but only briefly.
Well, I think either takes or g5, or maybe more accurately, I guess not. I thought the immediate g5 forces the knight away, and then you have the same old knight takes d5 move. But
you
I
also
guess
don't
here...
have f6, right? So maybe just
yeah,
h4.
exactly. So, you're right. You're exactly right. And the threat, of course, is to play h5 and f3 to trap the bishop. And if black plays h5, your entire center collapses.
Yeah, no, this is brutal. So that's why black has needed to play f6 as the move. So if you take the f6 square with knight f6 yourself, you're not going to be able to meet h4 very comfortably.
Exactly. So the current position is after queen e2, and Navara has settled into a long think here.
Hang on a sec. All we did was discuss what moves don't work. What move works?
Yeah, what moves do work?
Yeah,
okay,
it's
bishop
like,
b4
there's only one left, right? Bishop b4.
You got to pin the knight on c3. No other way, as you said.
We're showing you guys how to calculate. Process of elimination, right? Get rid of all those bad moves, and the only move that's left to develop your bishop, there you go.
It must be a good move, because there's always going to be a good move in every position. But now Adams could potentially castle. He could play bishop f4. I feel like white is pretty spoiled for choice here.
No doubt. Especially if you remember the match situation. Mickey Adams with the white pieces, he's the one who's ahead in the match. So I think he's exactly where he wants to be.
Oh, totally. And, perhaps he can even castle queenside in some of these positions, trying to quickly exploit black's relatively flimsy construction and that pin against the knight on c6. Definitely not what the doctor ordered for David. I guess the one redeeming thing about the position, Aman, is that it is imbalanced. You are going to get tactics here without question. And by definition, where there are tactics, there's the possibility of a blunder, of time pressure. And so I think David's keeping his head above water and remaining hopeful here. Bishop b4 was a good move.
Yep. Like bishop b4.
Okay.
We can jump around maybe to the other game in progress.
And we shall. And this is the current position. Very, very symmetrical. Close to symmetrical.
You called it. Symmetrical is a pretty good word here. He, very interestingly, did choose e5, it looks like. Which, black went for e5 and stopped that d4 move.
And I guess he waited for the bishop to move into b2 so that it just bites on granite. Because one of the key ideas for white here is to prepare the f4 pawn push. And that's a lot easier logistically with the bishop still being on c1 to control that square.
Right.
I think Fedoseev basically waited for the most opportune moment. Then he tries to prevent b4. Bishop h6. Wow, okay. Bishop back to c1. Very unconventional.
That's a weird game.
Almost looks like a Fischer random game if you just look at the notation.
Yeah, seriously.
But is Vladimir not losing his b5 pawn here? Or does he just not care?
I think he cares. I think it bothers him deeply.
He cares.
To his core.
I'm pretty sure it does as well. No, I mean, Kamsky's not risking here at all. This is exactly what he wanted.
Absolutely. And especially when you know that it's one of those games where, you need to draw. Like, when you're down a pawn, you need to make the draw. You can get in your own head and start to estimate that pawn advantage as a little bit more than it is. Whereas if you're the guy with the extra pawn, you're Kamsky in this position. The worst that can happen to you is somehow your opponent gets it back and, okay, you draw. Not the end of the world. You still have more chess to play.
I feel like you've cursed him now. And he's, you've said the worst that can happen is a draw. That in itself is the commentator's curse. And he's going to mouse slip and blunder his queen.
Oh man. Well, now you've
But yeah,
first came back, so then we're balanced.
now it means Fedoseev's going to lose because I said Kamsky's going to lose. Right.
Right,
Whatever
right.
the commentator says, the opposite basically happens. So if you say two contradicting realities, then, as you said, you balance the karma out.
There we go. Let these guys handle it.
Yeah. So Queen A6 here comes to my mind as a way to get the queen outside of the line of fire of White's rook and maybe slow down the A-pawn. What do you think of that?
Love it. Also like that it's eyeballing the D3 pawn. You know, and not just the D3 pawn, but to some extent the E4 pawn. Like knight F takes E4 with the pin on the queen on E2. So it depends if the knight, of course, jumps out of the way. But it's absolutely the square I would land the queen on, and it seems like Fedoseev agrees.
And Queen A6 is on the board.
Mm-hmm.
It is on the board. And yeah, Kamsky has to figure out a way to, to slow down some of this traffic on the queen side, because he's got a bunch of weaknesses like D3, as you said, E4, and that knight from C5 is pretty jumpy. You can move into A4. Tough position to convert here for Gata, for sure.
Like, do you have time for, I don't know, G3, H3, just one of these sort of moves?
I think Gata's going to do that even if he doesn't have time. Gata Kamsky without Luft is like a totally fish out of water kind of situation. Like Gata needs his prophylaxis, his positional moves, his slow chess. I think he's going to play G3.
Understandable. And I guess the main thing that I'm wondering is, what about rook B8? Because that's the most direct, like, hey, move your knight, and then I've got tons of pawns. Maybe I can take D3, A3.
Yeah, gimme Garoppolo. Give me that pawn on A3.
So
yeah, and how is White?
Is this a situation where you just give it back? Like, maybe let's say put a move on the board like H3 or G3, just a left move,
Rook
rook B8, and then D4.
Yeah, and then I guess
and you
I take on D4 first.
Yeah, knight F takes.
Yeah, knight F takes.
I don't know. You give the pawn back, but you're now in a very stable position. B5 knight, more than protected. I would argue, barely successfully, that the D6 pawn is weaker than the A3 pawn. I don't think there's anything too special here, but again, looks like a stable enough position for Gata. I would say this is reasonable for White.
Yeah, definitely something that could appeal to him as a way to eliminate the risk. But it is clear from Gata's time usage that he senses the importance of the moment. Rook C4 is what he settles on. And a clear prophylactic move, Aman. I think he wants to meet Rook B8 with Rook C to B4, shadowing Black's rook and protecting the knight, which protects the pawn.
Right on. Yeah.
What a move.
Yeah, that's awesome. And if you do the reverse and go Rook B4 rather than Rook C4, then you'll notice the analysis doesn't look great here. Knight takes D3, and you actually get checkmated on the back rank if, of course, you follow through and take that knight back.
Yep, that's a great point. And as you say, with Rook C4, everything is protected. There's no equivalent back rank combinations in the B file because Black doesn't have a rook on the B file. And now it's Fedoseev's turn to take a long think. And maybe we'll take this opportunity to switch back to the Adams game.
Yeah, I think it's a good moment there. We do witness that extra pawn for Kamsky, but back to this one, opposite bishops present in the position. And is it... I don't know. Is it fair to say like knight e7 is the first move that comes to mind because we want to maybe defend that c pawn and get castled? Like it's about to be pushing it. I think if we don't get castled the next move.
He's taken on c3, has Mr. Navara, and this cannot be good. That I will tell you.
That's an incredible
Queen a6
decision.
and Queen b7.
That looks nearly
I think
over.
he's gone. I think he's gone crazy. Queen a6. We pull
It's
up
too
an
much.
analysis board here. Knight f6, maybe. Where's the crusher?
Well, you know what I've always been thinking? I've always been thinking about bishop
Yes.
d2. That's right. You nailed it,
That's
Daniel.
exactly what you've
You're
always been thinking about it.
taking the move right out of my mouth there.
Completing each other's sentences. And look at this.
Wow.
And that's not even the best move.
Because-
I guess rook a b1.
Yeah, I was
No.
going to say
Whoa,
queen
sorry.
b7. Yeah, rook
ab1 minus
of course.
5.
Awful, terrible. What?
What? How
are you?
could I even think about activating the rook? Okay. Sorry, it keeps
Strange thing
bringing me
about
back to that position.
yeah, it's that your line is so wrong. We don't even want it on the board anymore.
Yeah, let's go back to the live position, which is this one with Adams. We'll just wait for him to play queen a6 because can you imagine a reality, Aman, where Adams does not play queen a6?
I'll present one. Bishop on d6.
There it is.
He'll present another, of course. Him and I will present a couple suggestions, but I was going to say,
I'm
bishop
shocked.
gets to d6, stops castling. That's one reality. Rook
But queen
looking to
a6
play
ends the
to
game.
d7. It really looked like it did, honestly.
No, it definitely
is
did.
this-
I mean, this is still.
It's enough.
I think this is still very, very good for white, but it's one of those things where now, if you start slipping and losing your grasp on the position, this is going to be the culprit when, that's what we're going to blame it on. If Michael loses control of the game and ultimately loses the game
That's true.
itself.
No, yeah, that's a good point.
Very strange to not play
And
queen
there's
a6 there.
funny thing about knight takes g6 is, you're actually kind of creating a situation where the queen from c3 might slide to h3 and then checkmate white with the rook from h8. So you get this weird coordination.
Wow.
Got to be a little careful.
That is pretty funny. It comes out of nowhere too. But all of a sudden, I feel like the situation has become orders of magnitude more complicated. d4 is hanging. Black is one move away from castling kingside. Where is white's advantage? I mean, do you play queen a6 now? But if you didn't play it on the previous move, then what's
you're
going
not
to
clamoring
impel you to play it now?
Plus, I don't
Exactly.
even, do I even believe it after castling? Queen a6, kingside castle. Black's structure is way better. g4 is misplaced, everything seems out of sorts here.
And I totally get why Adams just played queen e3. That, I think, is a very savvy move. Because you're basically saying, either we go into the endgame, or you grab on c2, which I don't know if I even want to talk about.
Might be a pawn too far.
So what do you do?
So what's the intention? So queen takes queen and then pawn takes?
I suppose so, just to secure the bishop, open the f file. White is a pawn down there, but total piece domination.
That's right, yeah. And knight takes c6. The interesting thing about taking that c pawn is that with the king on g8 after castling, black never has the option to play rook c8, the most natural move in the position, because of knight e7 check. Nice to remember.
That is nasty. Yeah, the bishop has no prospects in the long run. White's just got this, I don't even know what to call this arrangement of minor pieces in the center, but it's sitting on the entire position and restricting the blood flow. And White's controlling all of the avenues, entries, and exits. The B file, the C file, the 7th rank. I don't see this happening for Mr. Navara. I feel like he's in seriously dire straits.
He is,
maybe 94.
but I think his chances are way better than than previous. Things could have been over with queen a6 for white. All of a sudden, structurally, I will say I do feel like black is better. So even if white gets that pawn back, knight takes c6, I think black has the outside chance of just relying on his structure and saying, look, g pawn, a little bit too far advanced, weak kingside. there's that c2 pawn, which is going to be a backward pawn on the open c file, and not to mention attacked by black's bishop from g6. And if white ever plays knight takes g6, you've got a knight against bishop imbalance, and if you're down a point in the match, you're just looking for any imbalance you can get your hands on.
That's well put. And knight e4 is an excellent move, adding some spice to the position. My instinct here is to play f3 and force the queen trade. But after the queens are traded, the black knight can move back to d6 in order to cover the b7 square. And all of a sudden, oh no, I guess that's not possible because of knight takes g6. So maybe f3 is the move here. What do you think?
Well, the bishop will be on e3 though, so still possible.
Right. So you can play knight d6.
Yeah.
Suddenly, like black is fighting for an edge here.
Yeah, that's my feeling. I think that Adams, he's almost done it too well. He's being too careful, is what I want to say. Trying to get those queens off. Like, he's not taking his opportunity. Queen a6, right? That was the aggressive tactical solution. He's not punishing black's play, and I think there's that feeling that if you let your opponent get away with too many moves that they're not really supposed to be able to, then their position is just better. And I think we're close to that.
We definitely are. We've got the live position now pulled up with Adams deciding on rook b3, so another way to force the queen trade. And no question that the worst is behind black, but the only important question is whether black can generate realistic winning chances. And I still, Aman, maybe you disagree, I'm still inclined to say not really. I just don't see it happening for David, given white's level of piece activity here.
Well, it's great to be contrarian just to be contrarian, but I will say that I do fancy black's chances here. I think that Adams has not always been the best in the conversion phase. I feel like sometimes he's a little too careful. Missed opportunity, if we remember earlier in that end game. So not always the most accurate. And when he's got the advantage, I feel like that's where he's super accurate. But in these like equal positions where you gotta be super accurate, I don't feel like it's always there for him. And this might actually get pretty open, pretty tactical soon. So I will say I think this is a good chance for Navara, who is ahead, minute and a half on time. I think it's a good chance for him to try to take this to Armageddon.
And he's down a lot on the clock, which is potentially going to be important. I would say if he drops below 3 minutes, Adams, of course, not as an experienced as an online blitz player. And so that raises the possibility of panic as Navara brings his rook to b8 to contest the b file. And I assume that Adams will do the same. We still have that other game. It's heating up as well, by the way.
Oh, yeah. Let's take a look.
This is definitely promising.
Rook b6 move.
All right. Let's quickly switch to the other game where Kamsky seems to be maintaining that extra pawn as well as an initiative against black's king.
Yeah, this is bad news for Fedoseev, because it's one thing if white had this position without the a3 pawn. I would already say, okay, maybe a little uncomfortable, but then you've got that that a3 pawn that just says, okay, I'm sitting there. I might not be anything right now, but you trade off queens and rooks, all of a sudden endgame is just lost.
And it's also fulfilling a more like utilitarian duty. It's blocking the queen from accessing the first rank.
Right.
While white's queen is stopping the rook from accessing the first rank. So that pawn is like a beast. It's like the leader of the army almost.
It looks like queen takes f7. Obvious threat here. What can black do to deal with that? Of course you have f6. But I was...
That was not liked by the Evo bar.
Is h5 just really devastating here? Because remember, rook c1, as you pointed out, not possible. And h5 played. I think he's going to regret his decision to play knight f6 already. If pawn takes, there's some queen g5 and rook down to b8 stuff. That just looks dead. Yeah.
I think this is over. You saw that in a millisecond. If knight h5, will just show this on we can pull up the analysis board here. I'll show these lines. Queen f7 leads to quick checkmate. And if black doesn't do anything, let's just make a semi-random move. You don't even have a semi-random move. H6 check.
Yeah, exactly.
And white is going to make short work of the black king. Instead, Fedoseev, I think, plays the only available move. Back we go to the current
H6,
position.
right?
H6, yeah, and HGFG. But there's got to be a crusher here, no? Rook B8, I don't know.
Yeah,
Maybe just A4.
it's a funny move, actually.
That's a
I kind of
move.
like your move. Yeah, A4 is a great one because you've achieved something on the king side. Now you're like, okay, A4, your turn. What can you do? What useful moves do you have? You honestly might be considering A5, threatening rook B6. And if you take it, maybe rook B7 or something. Like, that A pawn could just win the game on its own.
Oh my god. And if you don't take it, then the rook gets to B6. It serves as an anchor point. No, this is over. And another problem is that if black goes G5, there's queen F5. And the white king always says H2 as an escape square in the event of a check on C1. Even if black could give a check on C1, it wouldn't help at all.
True.
Wow. This is amazing. Just filigree precision by Gata. And all he has to do is just finish it off with a couple more precise moves. Could probably even take on G6 here.
I was going to say, isn't he tossing material? Even more to the point
knight G4.
Is knight G4. Yeah.
Played. Wow.
Taking H6.
This is resignation time.
Oh, this is done.
Resign time population. Fedoseev, rook B8. No, rook B8 mate.
No, but yeah, this is... Oh, yeah, sorry. Even more clear. Absolutely over.
Wow.
And you can see the elation as he looked dead to rights, Danya. He looked like it was going to be two. And he knows that. That's the feeling of a guy that did not start this match well, but totally deserved to win it.
And don't breathe, because you were absolutely right. Michael Adams is about to lose with white as Kamsky continues the celebration. We're looking at him on camera, but on the board right now is Michael Adams. Aman, what has happened? He's lost the thread completely, and I think you called it.
What is happening is, as I expected, I just didn't have that. I just didn't have faith in his position. Like, pawn to E5, pawn to D4. That chain is going to be fully connected from G7 to D4. I still think it's not over, but when it's trending in this direction, right, it's nothing's going to go well for white from here. I think it only gets worse and worse.
Yeah, I mean, as long as there's opposite colored bishops, the game isn't over. Adam still has chances. And somehow Michael has to avoid losing all of his queenside pawns.
Yep.
And he's got to try to get Navara into some sort of time pressure.
And,
wowza. I mean, we've seen crazier things.
We certainly have. I think that Adams is not really the type to like let it slip and all of a sudden pull it back. What can he do? He's not like white has a position where you can be tactical, resourceful. It's like at this point, I feel like if Navara plays well, that's that. You can't change the evaluation of the position.
Nope, it's pretty much set in stone. I think E5 blunders the pawn with check. That is exactly what you don't do. And bishop E3 is the other threat that you must attend to. That is the big one. Don't go A5.
Right. Yeah,
that
rook
would be
B7
bad.
might be sufficient.
Yep. Yeah,
And
black is only going to be one pawn up. But it's +4.
And Gata winning that match actually means, Danya, that we don't have any perfect brackets in fantasy left. Gata being the... I don't know if he was the underdog specifically. I believe so, but he certainly was not favored in terms of what people filled out in their fantasy predictions. And I don't think we have any perfect brackets left.
And obviously Gata... I mean, everybody knows how much of a beast he is. I don't think that was out of a lack of respect that people didn't vote for him. It's just Fedoseev has been such a force majeure of late. Yeah. I mean, he has not bowed down before anybody. But that decision, Aman, you called it early, to take the draw in game 2, giving Gata a new lease on life, an amazing endgame display in game 3. and then finishing it off with just masterful surgical precision in game 4. But okay, let's see if David Navara can demonstrate some of that surgical precision, because Adams is still in it. This is not totally over.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
I feel like you want to get e5 in while you still can. So I'm definitely looking at the move e5. The other option being maybe king d6, just continuing to improve slowly and eventually play e5.
Yeah, e5 is going to come at some point. The question is when. Rook b5
like
first to defend the pawn.
Yeah, I'm a fan of that.
Okay.
Maybe rook d1 and rook d2.
Instead, he opts for bishop d4. Huh.
Okay, so
Where
pawn
is the
g5, right? Let's say bishop c4, because at least that makes
Okay.
a threat. Like bishop c4 to take a2, then white.
Ugh, do I have to
guess
go rook
goes for-
a1?
It's a pretty weirdly, yeah, it's a gross position.
Yeah, and if
I don't
rook
think you
a1,
can go
another
rook
idea.
a1.
Well, Black's just going to double on the second rank and give checkmate to the white king.
Yeah, right? Like it's just
Okay,
it's
g5
not
forced.
enough.
Oh, king e7,
Wow.
such an accurate move.
Yeah, that's painful to see as somebody who is like looking for counterplay, like water in the desert. I don't think you want to see the move king e7.
No, when you play g5, it's like I found a stream of water, and then you look and it's
Yeah.
like black and muddy and toxic.
Mirage.
Yeah, exactly. Still poking and prodding and trying and chiseling, but David Navara is not about to let this golden opportunity slip.
No, I actually
think it's
don't
over.
see anything now. That king
think
f7
it's
move,
resignable.
there's no f5, there's no g file, anything.
So rook takes
No.
a2, or do you keep the rooks on the board?
No, I think you want to get rid of the rooks, I would say. Also, bishop takes a2, c4.
Oh, that's vicious.
It'd be a
Ooh,
funny-
maybe king h5, king h6 is still a thought.
Yeah, it will be tried. I don't believe it for a second. And
Whoa, 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 whoa,
I guess
whoa, whoa, whoa.
Bishop d1.
No, but bishop
Yeah,
g6,
bishop
h4.
g6.
Oh, rook
Okay,
b2, rook
interesting.
b2, rook h2.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Oh, I think there might have been some sort of f5 idea
Yeah.
that Adams could have
F5
tried
indeed.
there.
Yep.
It's still not over, though, Aman. h5 is coming, and if he can send that rook around to g7, David's got 23 seconds. Don't count him out just yet.
True. This one
H5.
looks incorrect. Now h5 and you can swing the rook to a1 or something.
Yep. Where's the bishop going to go? Another decision that he's got to make. More time off the clock.
There's some
Okay,
fun
one
checkmate
A4.
ideas here, honestly.
And by extension, some fun stalemate ideas.
Yep. Ugh,
I don't
I'm
think Adams is
struggling,
pulling this
though.
off, but he's going to come close. Uh-oh. How do you make progress?
Okay.
What do you
Rook
do
e2,
with black?
rook e2, bishop, rook e2,
Rook
bishop
b2?
e1.
But I go rook b2, rook b7.
Yeah, e5 is key. E5 is going to have to be played.
Oh. E5 is so important to create that second
it's-
passer.
I think so. You could go a3,
So you're gonna find it, though.
honestly. Right? A3 and just allow the check. That's also there.
Could have done that. Still in the game. 5 seconds.
For sure.
3 seconds.
+2 is not a lot of time.
No, it evaporates instantly. Oh,
Wow, he goes back. Not f5.
can you take that pawn and go c4? No, because of bishop e4. Oh, you could have taken it, and then rook
Amazing.
takes e5 in the end.
Amazing. That was an opportunity there. Little sloppy from Navara.
Bishop b4. He's going to lose e5. Oh my god. Takes a3 and bishop b2. Bishop b2. Oh my god, Aman, he's going to save it.
Happening?
Oh, bishop c3
Wow.
and rook e5 is a draw. Oh my god. Oh, wait, is he lost?
Rook c5? Rook c5 and king d6.
No, but the king just... Oh my god, the king just runs into d2.
Yeah, you just can't stop it. And the bishop covers both
Oh my
pawns.
god. That's so unbelievable. Black's going to win after all.
Wow.
Rook c8.
And that would mean Armageddon, Danya. Oh my goodness.
Oh, and look at Black's king just like preventing White's king from reaching any of the key squares.
Yeah.
I can't believe what I just saw. It's all over.
Beautiful.
We've got Armageddon.
And as if we needed something even more pretty about this position, the bishop and the pawn, it's the right color on h1 for the promotion later. Wow.
The exchange sack was amazing. And this is a draw if Adams only takes on e5 first. It's over.
That's what we missed in the moment, because we knew there was a chance there, but what was it? Because bishop c3 looks so natural, and you can't do anything other than rook takes e5 after, but rook e5 first is beautiful.
And then, I mean, Black has to give a check on c6, the king steps back, and you can't save both the bishop and the pawn at the same time. That's how close Adams got to pulling a miracle comeback in that game.
Wow.
Unreal. Oh my gosh. Well,
we can't possibly escape this day, Danya, without Armageddon. Like, it's, you know, it's a tradition at this point. And as we look at the scores, obviously we had that Andreikin match finish up from earlier. He made actually a very short work of his opponent, Hakobian. Fedoseev and Kamsky, we saw the elation from Gata as he was hands in the air. Totally deserved moment as he moves on in the competition. Look at that comeback in games 3 and 4.
No, it was an incredible performance. As you said, the jubilation is well justified. Knocking out Vladimir, who, you know, is going to be very disappointed. He was hoping to get far, maybe even get into Toronto. But this is the nature of the CGC. Anybody can beat anybody. But right now, we've got an Armageddon game to play. The rules are simple. The players bid on the time. The player who bids the lowest plays with the black pieces. White will start with 15 minutes. So the player who bids the highest amount starts with white and has 15 minutes. And obviously, black has draw odds. If the game ends in a draw, then black wins the match.
Nice.
Oh,
yeah,
no,
the
now
Armageddon format is super fun.
We saw Vishy with a wild bid. Did you see that, Aman?
I did, yeah. I had to make
that?
sure that, like, he understood the rules, because, I mean, here in this house, we got Eric, who pretty much never understands the Armageddon rules that he's playing under, so relatable.
Oh, and there's no increment. I think that's
right.
the rule that's often forgotten about.
Yep. No increment in this Armageddon, even though you've been playing with increment the whole time. So that's a key one.
No, I honestly, I mean, apparently Eric forgot there was increment. There was no increment yesterday and still managed to win.
Right. That's right.
In any case, as the players make their bids, we will set them up for the Armageddon game. Do not go anywhere. We're going to have Michael Adams and David Navara duking it out in our last game of the day here at the CGC Day 2. Back with the Armageddon in just a couple of short moments. Welcome back to the Chess.com Global Championship. It's day 2, it's the knockout, and it's time for an Armageddon between Grandmasters Michael Adams of England and David Navara of the Czech Republic, 2 incredibly strong gladiators. Aman, I'm still processing what we just saw. Another win on demand of the black pieces. How many of those have we seen just in 2 days?
Yeah, and a lot of credit has to be given to these players that are able to do that, although it really does feel like a lot of collapse from the players who are ahead in the match. Like, they not only play a great 4th game, it's exactly what they need. They should be the only ones that can win, maybe even a big advantage. But it's the nerves that kick in that final game when you only need a draw to secure the match. Somehow that plays into your head, right? You play worse than usual. You're nowhere near that result. And wow, you called it. Like, we're going to another Armageddon. The bids are also in from the players, which gives us the ability to call the colors. Dania, it was actually Navara that bid lower. He bid 11 minutes flat, and Michael Adams bid 11:47. So it does mean that Navara starts the match with the black pieces and draw odds, but has 11 minutes to Michael Adams 15.
And I've been impressed with David Navara's online speed. I played him in the official random qualifiers. He has the pre-move mechanics down. He's fast in the opening. And I think that it's a big win for him, actually, that he's got black. And Michael Adams, he's going to have to take more risk. I mean, not playing Queen A6, that kind of reticence, he's going to have to scrap this game. If he has an opportunity to go for an attack like that, he's going to have to close his eyes and press on the gas pedal.
Yeah, I want to say definitely one thing that's interesting is, that knight end game, I think Mickey missed an opportunity. And in this final game, Mickey missed an opportunity with Queen A6. Now, imagine in both situations that Michael Adams had to win the game. I feel like he might find these moves. So we could be seeing an interesting situation where he's in a must-win game, and so he just lets go of those, I don't want to take too much risk feelings, and really goes for it.
No, I completely agree. And I'm very curious to see what opening we're going to see, because this Caro-Kann experiment didn't particularly succeed. But now, with David not needing to win, he can basically play his main stuff. He can play a Petrov. He can play something more solid, something he's more comfortable with. Let's find out what it is. Maybe an Italian. But Michael, throughout his career, has been a Ruy Lopez player. And something tells me we're not going to see a Berlin draw. I don't know why I think that.
Good feeling about that.
Yeah. Bishop C5. And now there's castles, and there's C3. And there's bishop takes D6. So lots of different structural changes that could happen here. And bishop takes D6 is Adams' choice.
Is appealing because of the imbalance, right? I mean, if you're playing a must-win game, I'll take an imbalanced pawn structure, imbalanced minor pieces. I think all these things are nice to have in the position, because it's harder to outplay someone in just static bishop versus bishop position, or 2 bishops each. But as soon as you get the imbalanced knight against bishops, then everything opens up.
Yeah, and generally you see black playing the move f7, f6 at some point, and then in an ideal setup, the knight from d7 reroutes to e6 in order to clamp down on the center, make it more difficult for white to engineer the freeing maneuver d4. But white also doesn't want to play d4 too early. Like, if white plays it here, black just takes and goes knight b6. So a lot of positional complexity in these structures.
And that's why c3 has been played, maybe to try to get d4 with a pawn to recapture on d4. You call for knight b6. It's actually on the board anyway. And the interesting thing about knight b6, knight a5 is that now you can't kick the knight out. Right? The knight's sitting on a5 and can't be booted by black's pawn because the knight's in the way. So interesting.
It's surrounded by enemy forces, and yet it's as unassailable as, even more unassailable than the other knight, which can be pinned by the bishop. So rook f7, potentially, I think, trying to hit on this target, on this tender pawn on d3.
Right.
And Will
And
Adams
also
push the...
I guess in a weird way, it gets the f8 square ready for perhaps a bishop. If you need to drop that bishop back for any reason, like after d4, you do have the f8 square, which is just completely out of the way.
This is ultra solid for Black.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in general, both sides are happy. Adams has gotten, as you said, an imbalance, a rich position, but Navara has gotten a position where you can play relatively fast with Black. And, you know, the margin of error is pretty wide just because of how solid you are here, structurally speaking.
Yeah.
Just don't go bishop g4.
Yeah, b7 needs to be taken care of. Rook b8. Now the bishop can move, whether it's e6 or even further out to g4. But I was also looking at even queen f8 and c5 as like a odd idea.
Kind of a liberating maneuver. Queen b3, queen e7. Preparing bishop e6.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point, Michael is going to have to, you know, assert himself on the queen side, either with c4 or with d4, right? Because Black keeps making improvements to his position.
Yeah.
Although the eval bar is hovering around a slight advantage for White, but I would argue that that is totally meaningless. I think the position's equal, practically speaking.
And knight d2, I think, can be played. Knight d2, bishop e2, rook e1, bishop takes d3, c4.
Ooh, let me show that real quick. If we can pull up a board here, knight d2, I think you get forked. But, whoop, and the bishop on d3 is trapped.
Right.
Can't do that. But instead, returning to the live board, Adams shifting his queen back to d1. Ooh, I'm on. Queen d1, really, Riley? Walking into f5?
Yeah.
What was that?
I don't know why you'd... Okay,
F5?
well, first of all, do you think he missed knight d2, rook e1, like this small thing? I mean, it wasn't terribly complicated, but it was necessary to understand knight d2 is playable. If he didn't see that, maybe that's why he played queen d1, but I think that's crazy.
But even allowing bishop takes f3 in this version is incomparably better than walking into f5. Now I feel like he's almost lost. Holy smokes, queen d1 is a howler.
It's pretty crazy. And if h3
oh my gosh. Fe.
Right. And yeah, you're just dropping pawns.
Oh man. I think you have to take on f5, hoping for rook takes f5, queen b3 check, unpinning the knight. The problem is if you play... But even in that position, Black can respond with knight b6 to d5. Whoa, Navara plays an even more combative move.
Yeah.
This is in the toilet.
This is trending very well. You got somebody playing quickly with the black pieces. Also, bishop f3. I don't know what could go wrong from there. Knight's coming to d5. Amazing chances for Navara, I would say, immediately.
Now, lest we forget, Navara only needs a draw here, which is maybe the most dejecting thing of all.
Exactly.
Oh, and I was thinking maybe knight g5 works, but the queen can just drop back to e5. Very easy move to blunder, by the way, and the game is immediately over. I really hope Mickey is not relying on knight g5. Of course, I'm going to jinx him. He's going to end up playing it.
Yeah, because knight g5 is one of these moves you might not see immediately. Might be calculating other things, and you're like, those things aren't that good. Oh, knight g5. Okay, that's pretty complicated. Let me go for that, and then the worst happens.
Yeah, you get excited about it, and when you get excited about a move, you don't calculate it as objectively. I don't see any other moves. I mean, Black's taking on f5, taking on f3. You're not going to lose that in a million years.
Right. But how much are you willing to compensate for your position? Like, let's say you need a win with white. Do you just play h3 and, take the double pawns, play that position and just go from there? Or do you try to make a move where you're giving yourself an even worse position, but it's, maybe chances for blunders?
I would have opted for the latter if Black had 2 minutes on the clock. David Navara has 8.5 minutes. That is an eternity. I mean,
eternity.
You think 3 minutes is a lot of time. 8.5 way too much to hope for some sort of a shenanigan or gimmick in a position like this. So if I'm Adams, I'm going h3 and basically just praying to all of the gods.
Yeah, you'll need to. I don't see what Adams does. I also think knight g5, queen takes f5 is an easy thing to expect, and queen e5 is such a nasty response. I really would not be surprised to see that move even now after so much thought.
Yeah, no, Adams doesn't see a move, and you know what often happens in these situations? You keep going in circles. Like you have these 3 candidate moves and none of them work, and you keep looking at them in the vain of hope that something will emerge. Rook E1.
Exactly. It's like
maybe the best that he can do.
Rook E1. Yeah, the thing is, Black's not going to be so quick to simplify here. Queen H5 is a nasty move.
Oh, God. I think you have to play H3 to avoid that. Only move.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. But then
and H3.
Is Black going to lose that in a...
Can we take it? Bishop takes H3?
Bishop. Oh, Queen H5 ends it, I think.
Yeah, Queen H5 is for sure game over, followed by, like, I don't know, Rook takes F3 or Bishop takes anything.
I think Queen H5 Adams can simply resign.
Yeah.
This was an ugly game.
This was an ugly game. The time is irrelevant because this game's going to end before then.
Yeah, I mean, it's a 19-move game. I'm still shocked at Queen D1. I feel like that was just a move where you just gave up hope and you just like mailed it in.
I think he might resign.
And a heartbreaker. And he does.
He does resign.
And David Navara, the man is a beast.
Bad start. You know, you kind of like get out of the gate poorly, almost like 100-meter race in track and field. If you just start poorly, all of a sudden everyone's so far ahead of you that it's just like, okay, you know, next race. I can't keep up here. And honestly, I want to credit Navara for playing that game differently than a lot of people approach Armageddon. You might say, oh, I have draw odds. Let me be solid. But he went for the throat. As soon as Queen D1 was played, F5, E4. And I think that's how you play with Black and Armageddon.
Yes.
You stick it to white. It's still a chess game. Equal chances for both sides.
I think we're beginning to see that is the most surefire recipe for success if you're Black. And for Michael Adams, a heartbreaking way to exit the tournament. But it was a good run. He was so close. And David Navara is going to have a chance to step up his game in the round of 32. We are going to start wrapping up, starting with an overview of the results. So if we can pull up the results from today, I'm on another amazing day full of action, and we've got our 3 winners.
Pay attention to those. The bottom 2 matches, a really interesting thing about them is you see the 1 point followed by 1 point for Kamsky, and the same with David Navara. Winning on demand in order to, you know, stay in the match and make it competitive, and then proceeding to win on top of that to actually take the match home. So Kamsky did it within the 4 games in regulation, and David Navara did it using the Armageddon tiebreak. So honestly, just clutch performances by those 2 players, and they're going to move on. They're going to destroy people's fantasy brackets. And what does that mean for Group D, Dania? As we take a look at the bracket here, we can see the players have moved on.
Well, I have been pining for this matchup for a very long time. We did not see enough of it in the RCC, and that is Kamsky against Dmitry Andreikin. Does Dmitry Andreikin have a kryptonite? Because it's not Hikaru, it's not Yana Pomnishi. Maybe it's Kamsky. Maybe it's that solid boa constrictor style. Maybe you need to fight fire with fire. And a 15+2 time control is generous enough for Gata to avoid getting to time pressure. An amazing display against Fedoseev. Gata's going to have to step it up even further. I can't wait, Aman, for Kamsky Andreikin. That's going to be one for the ages. And of course, over up top, we saw Jose Martinez winning barn burner against Kirill Alexenko yesterday in the most improbable fashion. And he's going to be playing the winner of Fabi, who will be facing Martin Kravtsov. Another awesome match to look forward to.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, we did get our Armageddon, Dania. We got our fix, so to speak.
Yep.
That was super exciting. Really impressive that I feel like maybe White has been doing really well in Armageddon because players are kind of bidding in a weird way. But I thought that Navara bid in a way that was really comfortable for him, 11 minutes, and he played a really solid game. Michael Adams, sad to see him exit the tournament, but that is the unforgiving nature of the knockout format.
It is indeed. And if you're starting to experience withdrawal as the day comes to an end, worry not, because you don't have to wait very long for more exciting matchups. Tomorrow has another 2 batches of amazing chess to be played. Look at these matchups with Hu Yifan making her appearance against Rajabov, Arjun Erigaisi, the stunning, dynamic Indian junior who recently hit 2730, will be making his appearance against David Parabian. Shakhriyar Yanapamnichi and Svidler against Shurov is just going to be a barn burner in its own right. Amon, every one of these matches, and I'm not exaggerating, has the capacity to be one for the ages.
Yeah,
I mean,
100%. I'm really looking forward to the matches tomorrow. Really, the match featuring Mamedyarov should be super exciting. Kovalev is such a dynamic player, and I think Svidler and Shirov, every match with Shirov in it is just guaranteed to be exciting. And nice to get Peter Svidler out of the the commentary booth and back into the action. Tremendous player in his own right, and there's just so much to look forward to. Hu Yifan making her debut, as you said, and work cut out against Rajabov there.
Indeed. Well, before we wrap up, we wanted to ask you whether you are a product manager, whether you're at work, and whether you're watching chess right now. Anybody like that among you? Well, if you are on company time, then shame on you. Go back to... Nope. Just kidding. We need you to help coordinate events like PogChamps, the SCC, the CGC, and more. Make sure to type !PMOE, !PMOE in chat for all the details. Combine your passions and love for chess on the world's greatest team. Join chess.com as a product manager, watch tournaments, and help us out in a very important capacity. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, time has come for us to wrap up. Aman, always a pleasure commentating with you. These 3.5 hours went by so very quickly. Really so thank you, Aman. I feel like we just started. We're already ending, but more CGC tomorrow. I'd like to thank our producer, Hala, everybody on our lovely, amazing Chess.com team for the amazing graphics, flawless production, and of course, everybody in the chat on Twitch, YouTube, and all the platforms for supporting your favorite player. And now for Grandmaster Aman Hamilton, everybody on our Chess.com team, GM Daniel Naroditsky saying goodbye for the Chess.com Global Championship Day 2. We will see you tomorrow, bright and early. Have a great rest of the day.